Volume 1, Synopsis. Helmut was a child who had been abandoned in the demonic beast forest at birth. Raised by demonic beasts, the first human that he met was the Sword Saint Darien. Little did Helmut know that the chance encounter would soon shake the foundation of his fate. Grow stronger if you want to get out of here. The boy who'd lived like a beast was thrown into the human world. He possessed overwhelming swordsmanship, outstanding looks, and sharp intelligence, but there was one thing he lacked: humanity. I am no longer prey, I am now a predator. Prologue. It was a night as dark as ink. Whoosh. The chilly wind rustled the branches, making them sway. The cries of beasts mixed together, echoing in the air. 5 men concealed themselves amidst the natural sounds, moving through the tall grass towards a certain location. The sinister glints in their eyes flickered like the gleam in a beast's eyes. At the end of their gaze there was a faint light. Almost burnt out, it cast a soft glow in the surroundings, a campfire almost dying out. And beside it, a sleeping bag, inflated like a bubble, and its owner appeared to be sound asleep, completely unaware of the world around them. Just as I expected, a rookie. One of the men inwardly smiled. To fall asleep without caution in a place like this. If this skilled fellow had resisted, it would have been troublesome. Things were going well. The 5 men exchanged signals. Swiftly, like closing a net around their prey, they closed in on the sleeping bag. The man at the front drew a dagger. The dagger descended menacingly like lightning from the sky. Swoosh. The leather sleeping bag was punctured by the dagger and crumpled deeply as if it had been empty from the beginning. The man opened his eyes. What? A shiver ran down their spines. Then from above a voice dropped. Over here. Their gazes immediately shifted. A young boy appeared casually, raising his hand from a tree. He must have been around 16. His youthful face was refined and neat like that of a noble's son. But there was an unusual aura about him. In the moonlight, his face, glowing pure white, had pitch-black pupils that stood out like abysses. They hadn't sensed his presence at all. Goosebumps spread over the men's bodies. You ambushed me armed, so it wouldn't be a crime to kill you, all right. The boy, who had been contemplating for a moment, said. There were 5 attackers in a 1-on-5 situation without any room for doubt. So this would be self-defense. The boy concluded decisively. A boy placed a branch on his bowstring and nonchalantly aimed the bow at them. Watch out for the arrow. With those words, an arrow was released. Is he joking? What could he possibly do with a tree branch like that? Before they could even think about it, the arrow flew at them with lightning speed. Quang, a shockwave as if iron was colliding, resonated through the air. The result was shocking. Ugh! The stench of blood spread. One man's entire arm was torn off and he writhed on the ground. They were struck by a shock bordering on panic. If a mere tree branch could deliver such an impact, then. It's vis, one man exclaimed in astonishment. Yes. The boy, who responded nonchalantly once again, hooked a tree branch onto the bowstring. As he pulled back, the next arrow flew. Swoosh! There was no avoiding the invisible arrow. Another man collapsed to the ground without a sound this time. Despair. The faces hidden behind the 3 remaining masks turned pale. They couldn't comprehend what was happening. Overwhelming and crushing strength, fear swallowed them whole. If you dodge, I'll spare you. Should I give them a glimmer of hope? The savage grin of a predator spread across the boy's face. He hooked another tree branch onto the bowstring. As they began to flee screaming, he leisurely drew back the bowstring, watching the backs of the men. The boy's lips moved. 1, 2, 3, thwack. An arrow laden with force shot out and cut through the darkness of the forest like a nocturnal predator. And in no time, it pierced the throat of a fleeing man. The boy's lips moved again, pulling the bowstring consecutively. 1, 2, 3, 4, eek. Along with a deafening sound of agony, the air was torn apart. 1 arrow, 1 life. Dull arrows pierced through the darkness in succession. PL, please. Looking down at the 5th and final man, who knelt and begged for mercy, the boy said calmly, if you had thought of killing, you should have been prepared to die. The last arrow was released. The boy, who had eliminated the 5 attackers from the tree, leaped down to the ground. Thunk. A sound almost inaudible as he touched the ground, moving lightly. He approached the lifeless bodies with an air of indifference. His cold, black eyes looked down apathetically at the faces twisted in terror. You're as weak as insects. His voice carried an expression of absurdity. The boy slightly wrinkled his face and clenched his hand before releasing it. His hands were unstained by the handful of blood spilled just moments ago. This was nothing more than a light exercise. The people from outside are weak. They lack even the instinct to protect themselves. Blinded by greed, they can't even recognize their opponents. The attackers approaching from a distance had been known to him for a while. His keen senses alerted him to their approach. Then all he had to do was wait and eliminate them. The fact that the opponents were 5 trained individuals was not a problem. Helmut, the only human to emerge from the forest of beasts, muttered with dry eyes. Darien, contrary to what you said, the human world is quite boring. Casually, Helmut rummaged through the attackers' belongings and gathered items worth pilfering near the campfire. He dug a deep pit near the campfire. Having cleanly erased the existence of the 5 men as if nothing had happened, he gathered his belongings and left the place. Chapter 1. The Forest of Roots. High status, powerful parents, all useless. A cursed being, a trace of the devil who once almost destroyed the world. The newborn baby born through the seed of darkness was singled out as a being destined to become something wicked. Die or be sent away to death, one of the two. With the cries of his mother, the baby was thrown into the Forest of Roots. The reason it wasn't killed outright was that it would die eventually anyway. In the unforgiving realm of the demonic beasts realm, where no one has ever come out alive, despite swallowing countless lives, the Forest of Roots remained as dark and deep as ever. A vast forest, Roots. A cursed realm that even uttering its name brings a sinister feeling. Drenched in thick magic, this forest, tinted in a subtle shade of black, was as dangerous as it appeared on the surface. The densely intertwined undergrowth and shifting trees disoriented one's sense of direction, and even beautiful flowers concealed deadly toxins capable of killing a fully grown man. And then, there were the monsters. Predators transformed by the magic into destructive and powerful creatures. If these malevolent beings that roamed this forest were to spill into the human realm, disaster would surely follow. However, a sacred barrier separated Roots from the outside world, preventing any being from leaving this place. Those with magic could not cross the boundary. That was an absolute proposition. Conversely, no one attempted to enter Roots. As a result, over the course of many years, Roots became a realm that existed only in legends, far and remote. People regarded Roots with trepidation but did not consider it a practical threat. Some creative minds even found a way to utilize Roots. If it's a place from which no one can return, why not send those who shouldn't live in there? I can't believe there is such a method. While everyone was in admiration, a cruel decision was made. Roots became a place to deal with those who should neither live nor die. Apart from capital punishment, the most dreaded punishment for criminals was to be sent to Roots. Those who came out of here were absolved of all sins. However, due to sacred magic, among those who randomly fell into this forest, not a single person ever emerged. Roots was a place from which no one could return. The baby, just escaping the clutches of death thanks to the abundant magic in the forest, did not perish. Wah wah. Crying softly, the baby eventually grew tired and fell into a deep slumber, breathing weakly. The harsh cold and hunger in the forest had been cruel to the fragile infant. However, within the round mass nestled like a seed in the depths of the heart, a strange power surged and enveloped the body. Surviving for 10 days, a time of alternating day and night, with nothing to eat or drink, the baby's determination was remarkable. If it had been discovered by a dreaded monster, it would have died on the spot, so one could say luck was on its side. Finally, on the 10th day, the tattered swaddling cloth was abruptly removed, and with a hot breath, a pair of distinctive eyes shone. Crrrrunch. Under a flexible spine, 4 sturdy legs extended like columns, with thick claws emerging. The cloud-like spots on the dark fur were so deep that one could hardly tell they were black. The sharp teeth of the fierce beast gleamed in the moonlight, a giant leopard radiating a brilliant white light. Yet the size was enough to make even those who had seen many things faint. The long, sharp fangs were threatening enough to tear apart the tender flesh in front of these eyes in one swift motion. However, despite having a prey right in front of her, the leopard hesitated. It was a baby. There was no fear to be found in his gleaming black eyes. Not crying in front of a beast like this was a remarkable feat. Innocent pupils. The leopard extended her tongue and tasted the baby. Its rough tongue gently brushed against the delicate skin. The baby was surprisingly calm. When the fragrant and savory scent tickled his nose, he smacked her lips. After briefly hesitating, the leopard lifted the baby with her tail. Instead of crying, the baby burst into laughter. Whether the leopard intended to take the fresh delicacy to savor it or had other thoughts, that determined the baby's fate. Ilaga, the giant leopard that claimed a part of Roots's forest as her territory, took the bounty in her tail and leisurely returned to her lair. Chapter 2, Part 1, Helmut Remembers. The warm touch that enveloped his face, the woman who shed tears with compassionate eyes. She was a beautiful woman with long golden hair. Teardrops fell from her gentle blue eyes. The woman called out a name that she would never call again. Helmut, Helmut. The child instinctively realized that it was his own name. Soon, rough hands forcibly took him from his mother's embrace. Heart-wrenching screams pierced his eardrums. Before being dropped into an unfamiliar place, the child engraved his name in his mind. When he could pronounce his name properly with his tongue, he would point to himself without forgetting. I am Helmut. Ilaga, a leopard with intelligence who has lived for a long time, asked a question as if she were absurd. Arrogant kid, do you want your prey to call your name? It's Helmut. With a determined face, the child repeated stubbornly. Why didn't I eat that thing after bringing it here? Ilaga growled irritably, sensing that something was amiss. Without showing any fear, the child stared intently at the big leopard that had only revealed her fangs in front of him. It's the leopard that looked after him by giving him food and a warm place to sleep and cared for all this time. Even when she growled, he didn't become frightened. Alaga roared, "Kara," and then a moment later he reluctantly said, "You can't eat this human, Helmut." "Got it, yes, your name, Helmut." The child looked at her with a somehow satisfied expression. Helmut was a peculiar child. Influenced by the darkness inside him, he awakened his intellect early on and developed his body faster than an ordinary human child. The unusually mature Helmut didn't cry loudly or whine. With jet-black eyes and a contrasting white face, he was just as handsome as a girl. Perhaps recognizing the one who provided him with food, Helmut strangely felt attached to the threatening, giant leopard from the beginning and followed him around obediently. Whether she observed his surroundings while pouncing or played around when he got sleepy, he didn't care whether Alaga threatened or spoke to him, and he slept clinging to her fur. Alaga chuckled. "You adapt surprisingly well, don't you?" Perhaps he was born with such a personality. "Well, it's good that you don't cry annoyingly," Alaga thought comfortably. Among the monsters she only dealt with annoying creatures with sharp eyes. The tiny and fragile human child seemed somewhat cute. "He's a bit of a hassle, but he's cute." Watching the little one's actions with a small smile on his lips, it felt a pleasant satisfaction. When the one who used to crawl on the floor suddenly started running, it also felt a sense of pride. However, from the moment Helmut's mouth opened, Alaga realized that the little one who had been a bit of a hassle was actually very annoying. It was convenient to throw food to him, and when he was sleepy, he slept. But the growing Helmut, who was growing up healthy, didn't seek rare affection or love from Alaga, but he wanted something else. Helmut was curious about many things. He started asking questions whenever he was curious about something. The questions were endless. For example, why does Alaga have so much fur? One day Helmut, who used to curl up in the cold at night, asked while stroking Alaga's white fur. Alaga proudly showed off her carefully groomed fur every day and replied, "Because I'm a leopard. Why do leopards have so much fur? To preserve body temperature." "Then why I don't have fur? It's cold." "Because you're a human." "Why don't humans have fur?" "How should I know that? Stop asking annoying questions." Chapter 2, Part 2. The conversation ended in the typical fashion, with Alaga losing her temper. Patience was never a virtue for a creature like Alaga, who was a monster from the beginning. However, Helmut didn't give in. Since then, he would seize any opportunity to pester Alaga, his sole conversation partner, with various questions. "Alaga, what's this called? Alaga, is this something to eat? Alaga, why is your name Alaga?" Kaya, a stubborn person who wouldn't be swayed by tantrums or threats. As even the fur that she proudly flaunted began to fall out due to stress, Alaga climbed up a tree in frustration. "If this continues, I might explode from the inside." That day, Alaga made up her mind. "I need to make him self-sufficient and let him go quickly." However, it took longer than expected for Helmut to become self-sufficient. The growth of the human child was slower. Time passed like a snail until he could stand and walk on his own. Left alone, he might die at any moment, so he had to be fed regularly, and he continued to pester with questions. Alaga also understood that learning was part of growing up. Humans grew up with learning, but Alaga was sincerely suffering. It felt like her lifespan was decreasing within the endless cycle of parenting. Alaga was a monster. And monsters don't usually care for children, they don't nurture them, but she took care of Helmut. Why? Nobody knows why, it just happened naturally. Sometimes the flow of things has a certain inevitability. Alaga had become accustomed to the shackles of parenting. The little one had grown quite a bit, as much as a mouthful more. One day, when Helmut turned 10, he said to Alaga, "I want to try hunting too. If you learn to hunt, you can fend for yourself, right?" "Yes." Alaga readily agreed. Choosing a target was not difficult at all. In Alaga's vast territory, there were creatures big and small coexisting. Thanks to Alaga's implicit tolerance, the forest of roots was vast, but the monsters couldn't venture beyond the sacred boundary. When the strong ones growled and dominated their territories, the weak ones had no place to go, so they naturally shared their territories. The powerful monsters that ruled large territories would watch each other, but territorial disputes were between predators, not the birds or mice that passed by. Of course, Alaga's territory didn't look like a peaceful pasture. Underestimating it meant inviting a challenge in the Pahi forest. Monsters transformed from wild animals were a good source of food. Alaga hunted them and fed Helmut. At the age of 10, Helmut knew a lot about the forest of roots, especially where he himself was in the forest. If Alaga hadn't masked his scent, he would have been eaten without a trace. Even if he had the seed of darkness, a 10-year-old boy couldn't just hunt as he pleased. "But there are creatures I can hunt." Helmut made a plan. When he said he wanted to try hunting, he didn't say it in vain. Alaga watched from a distance. She had shown Helmut how to hunt many times. Although there was a huge physical difference, Helmut would know the techniques. Helmut waited in the trees. He knew that there were creatures below that occasionally appeared and ate grass. After a short wait, the creature that had discreetly appeared greedily buried its head in the lush foliage. Now, without hesitation, Helmut leaped down and pounced on the target. Thump kaya kaya, a scream pierced the eardrums. It was grotesque to call this creature a rabbit given its enormous size. It had sharp teeth and a body as big as a tree trunk. I'll get my bones torn if I let my guard down. Cold sweat dripped down his neck. Helmut didn't compare to Alaga in terms of physical strength, but he used his strong hands to firmly press on the target's neck. This was the weak point. Kai Ki had struggled fiercely. Being just 10 years old now, Helmut couldn't hold on for long. I need to quickly cut off its air supply. Helmut quickly reached out and grabbed a sharp rock. Then he vigorously struck the struggling rabbit's head. Crunch, a mixture of blood and brain matter splattered on his expressionless face. Instant death. Convulsions ran through the rabbit's body and its strength faded. Helmut calmly turned the lifeless body over. It was his successful first hunt. His excited bird-like pupils stared through the lifeless rabbit. Step aside. From the distance, Alaga, who had been leisurely observing, approached with a nonchalant stride. Helmut stepped back and Alaga raised her claws and slashed the rabbit's chest. The ground was soaked with the spurting blood. Helmut wiped the splattered blood from his face with the back of his hand. Alaga used her sharp claw tip to slowly extract something from the rabbit's chest. A small, spherical shape with a dark, ominous hue. It seemed to contain darkness within it. Helmut had never seen this before because Alaga had always eaten her prey immediately. See, this is a core. When you eat it, you become stronger and it replenishes the life force that diminishes as you age. This one is small because the creature was weak. Helmut nodded, just as he was about to reach out for his first prey, whereto, Alaga, flicking her tail, forcefully pushed Helmut away and swiftly swallowed the core. What are you doing? Helmut, who was about to sulk, grabbed Alaga's fur in annoyance. Alaga thumped the ground with her tail. Why can't I even have this one? Are you stingy? You should have asked if you wanted it. With a grumpy response, Helmut turned his head abruptly. Alaga chuckled. Seems like you're getting better. Normally, Helmut scratched and Alaga threw tantrums. The current situation was quite pleasant. You're a human. If you eat something like this and become a monster, you won't be able to leave the forest. In any case, that was the biggest reason. Alaga didn't do this on purpose to tease Helmut. Alaga closed her mouth, feeling somewhat lonely. Helmut, who stared blankly at her, began to drag the lifeless rabbit away. The meat was his reward. Chapter 3 Part 1. As he carried the rabbit, Helmut was lost in thought. Alaga, the leopard, had intelligence but was not accustomed to conveying knowledge or engaging in conversation. Whenever Helmut asked something, Alaga found it very bothersome to explain or answer and would run away. Because of this, Helmut developed a habit of immersing himself in contemplation. Through this contemplation, he found and learned answers that no one else could provide. Helmut was pondering over Alaga's words. If I could leave, why would I have been abandoned in this forest? It was dangerous to reach the boundary, but as long as he was born with the seed of darkness, he could not break through the sacred barrier that repels all kinds of magic. The same core that was taken out of the rabbit's body was also embedded in Helmut's heart. From some point, Helmut could vividly feel the presence of the seed of darkness. The seed of darkness, which had been embedded in his chest since birth, grew bigger by eating things growing in the forest and gradually brought him strange powers. Strong grip strength, agile movements, developed senses and extrasensory perception, language skills, and the like. It was the power that allowed Helmut to survive, but at the same time it was a constraint that bound his fate. As a monster that had lived for a long time, Alaga, the intelligent leopard, knew a little about human habits. When Helmut ate raw meat in his childhood and had a stomachache, Alaga naturally lit a fire with magic. From then on, Helmut cooked his meat. In front of the crackling bonfire, roasting meat, Helmut opened his mouth after much thought. Anyway, I can't leave the forest of roots because of the seed of darkness. If I can't leave, isn't it better to eat the core and become stronger? That would be realistic. Looking at the bonfire, Alaga spoke in a low voice. You can leave. How do you know? At the questioning gaze, Alaga chuckled. Just because you haven't seen anyone leave, you think you can never leave. I said you could leave. Who told you that? Somewhere to the east of here, a human I met. Helmut's eyes shook from side to side. He was surprised. It was the first time he had been so surprised. A human? Helmut had never seen a human other than himself since he was born. The Forest of Roots was vast, and the locations where humans were sent from the outside varied. Even if they harbored the seed of darkness, most babies die within a day or two. Exiled humans last a little longer. The number of surviving humans was extremely small. Especially around Alaga's territory, it was difficult to survive because there were many fierce monsters. The reason Helmut survived was purely due to good luck. Alaga raised me, so Helmut thought of Alaga as family, but even so, Alaga and Helmut were not the same. They were different from the root. Alaga belonged to the forest of roots, but Helmut sometimes felt a sense of alienation in the dark and rough forest of roots. It felt strange to have to stay here forever. Perhaps it was because he was human. Are you going to look for him? Don't even dream about it. That human must be dead by now. How can you be sure? Annoyed by the persistent questioning, Alaga swung his tail and broke a branch, because that human was old. At the gaze looking up at him, Alaga spat out as if annoyed. He was an unusually strong human. But in this forest of roots, no matter how strong a human is, they can't withstand the magic and gradually weaken. He wasn't like you, having the seed of darkness, so he wouldn't have lived long. I saw him long before you appeared, so he must be dead by now. Tell me where you last saw him. Why, now that I've raised you, you want to go find a human, you ungrateful creature. I have to live on my own when I grow up. I'm 10 years old now. 10 years old if you compare it to a leopard. He was a fully matured male. But in Alaga's eyes, Helmut was a little bigger than a bean. Alaga was taken aback. You're a human. Humans have a long way to go to grow up. Anyway, that human, let's see. Alaga was racking her brains. In fact, she had completely forgotten about it until now. He must have been about 90 years old. Humans live up to 100 years, you said. Where did you see him? The reason Helmut was persistently asking was nothing special. He was just curious. A human who might still be alive. A human he had never seen since he fell into this forest. He's bothering me again. If I don't tell him, he'll keep bothering me. Alaga finally opened her mouth. I don't know if he's still living there. If he's not there, I'll come back. Alaga said he was strong. In the forest of roots where monsters are frolicking, a human who is strong enough to be recognized by Alaga, he was suddenly curious. A strong human without the seed of darkness. Even with the seed of darkness, Helmut was weak compared to the monsters in the forest. Helmut was curious about his strength. How can a human be as strong as a monster? Do as you please. In the end, Alaga, who lost her temper, told him the last place she saw that human. It was a 3-day walk for Helmut. It was a direction he had never been to before. Even if you die on the way, I won't know. Alaga turned around and sat down. Helmut, who got up, glanced at Alaga and started walking in the direction it had mentioned. Chapter 3, Part 2, Helmut walked very quietly without making a sound. Without Alaga's protection, he was nothing more than strange prey in this forest full of monsters. The first thing Alaga taught him was how to hide his presence. Fortunately, he had the scent of Alaga on him. There were no monsters brave enough to touch Helmut, who had the scent of Alaga in this vicinity. Alaga said it's beyond where the flower vines are lush. The flower vine, which contained poison, was brilliantly blooming red flowers. But in the forest of roots, you should not let your guard down just by looking at the beautiful appearance. The flower vine was a carnivorous plant. It'll quickly grab the body of the creature that came to it, inject poison through the thorns, and take it as nutrients. It was a plant as dangerous as any monster, but fortunately it only grew near the water. Careful not to provoke them, Helmut cautiously walked around the vine thickets. Soon, he encountered an obstacle. Carefully avoiding the flower vine to avoid stimulation, Helmut soon hit a roadblock. A cliff, I can't jump over it. The other side was quite far. Alaga could jump over it, but it was impossible for Helmut. The bottom was a deep abyss with fierce water flowing. I must safely cross it. Helmut decided to cross the water where the cliff was lower, taking a detour to the left. Leaving a mark on this cliff, Helmut changed direction. The cliff was getting lower as he went downstream. He hadn't walked for a few hours when he reached a crossroads where he could cross the valley. The valley, seen up close, was wide and deep. Do I have to swim across here? Helmut approached the water's edge. The current was not strong. The transparent valley with a green tint was clear enough to see the bottom. The temperature of the water would be as cold as ice. Wait, Helmut, who was about to throw himself into the water carelessly, stopped abruptly. He felt a chill down his spine. It was a sensation that stimulated his instincts. That sensation had saved Helmut several times before. Helmut took a step back and looked into the water. He felt a gaze watching him from under the water. A familiar gaze. It was the gaze of a predator. Splash! Suddenly something exploded out of the water. He threw his body to the side like lightning. Splash! It violently covered the place where Helmut had been. It was a green fish similar in color to the water. The creature, the size of Helmut's torso, was wriggling, revealing sharp and dense teeth. It fixed its gaze on Helmut, opening and closing its mouth, trembling with regret. Eyes crazed with hunger, chills ran up his spine. Helmut, who had picked up a sharp stone from his waist, struck the creature's head. Crack! The fish was shaking its tail and took its last breath. It had sharp teeth, but it was a monster of a weak species. Helmut, who let out a sigh of relief, took a few steps back from the water's edge. There's more than one. He felt faint signs in the valley water. Numerous monsters of the same species as that creature were targeting him. How do I get across? If he goes into the water, he will be torn apart and die. If he goes upstream, the width of the valley might narrow. He would have to go against the direction he had come so far, but that would be safer. But if I leave Alaga's territory, the monsters will target me right away. If he goes a little further in that direction, he will leave the territory. Looking at the width of the valley, he would have to go a long way to reach a place where the waterway was narrow enough for him to jump over. The risk would increase. Helmut's eyes became serious. It's too early to give up. If he goes back like this, he will only receive Alaga's ridicule. There must be a way. Surely Helmut was just a young boy, but human strength did not originate from a weak body. Unlike monsters born with strength, humans have a way to complement themselves with something else. As he calmly looked around, his gaze fell on the flower vine nearby. A good idea came to mind. The efficacy of the poison contained in the flower vine is to paralyze the body and lose consciousness. Will it still be effective if it's diluted in water? He picked up a sharp stone and sneaked up to the flower vine. In response to the vibration, the thorny vine moved slowly. No matter how fast it moves, it's a plant. Before the vine attacked, Helmut moved first. He caught the end of the vine and cut it off with a stone knife. Crack. A bluish liquid flowed out from the vine. Having severed the vine several times through the same process, Helmut obtained a sufficient amount. The vine, which had rapidly reduced in size, withered away and died. Chapter 4, Part 1. If I get injured, I might get poisoned too. Living in the forest of roots had given Helmut some immunity, but he didn't know if the venom could seep in through a wound and make him lose consciousness underwater. He had to be careful. Helmut carefully examined his body. Superficial scratches were nothing to his tough body. Good. First, he made a cut in the vine so that the poison flowed out well. Helmut first threw a pile of vines into the water. It was a moment when the water flow was high and then flowed. The movement of the fish noticeably slowed down. It seems to be working properly. Being underwater creatures, they probably didn't have much immunity to the poison of the flower vines. Helmut held the remaining vines and slowly stepped into the water. The water quickly reached his waist. Even though they were twitching, the paralyzed fish could only roll their eyes and couldn't attack. Helmut calmly watched them as he continued walking. When the water submerged up to his neck, Helmut swam with the vine tucked in his side. His body naturally floated on the water. It seemed like he could cross smoothly like this. However, as he approached the shallower point on the other side, his foot accidentally slipped. Splash! With a loud noise, Helmut, who was about to collapse underwater, quickly lifted his other foot. It was a chilling sensation. Helmut hurriedly looked down. The ground cracked and white teeth opened their mouths. It felt like waking up from sleep and seeing a ghost right in front of you. The blood in his body cooled down. Helmut urgently pushed the pile of vines he had into the water and beat on the water's surface. He struggled and headed for the shore. But the creature that swallowed the vine, chewing and swallowing it, quickly rose. It seemed that the venom didn't work on the creature. Swoosh! The strong current shook Helmut like a fallen leaf on the water's surface. He barely managed to hold on and not get swept away. His whole body stiffened in the torrent that hit him like a wave from behind. A life-or-death moment. Splash! Something heavy like a meteorite hit the water surface. A tremendous baptism of water hit Helmut. Helmut fell straight to the shore. For a moment, his consciousness turned white due to the impact. The huge figure that had fallen onto the water's surface shivered as if it had just awakened from sleep. Ah, refreshing! Helmut, who regained his senses, spat out the venom-mixed water from his mouth. He straightened his shivering body and muttered with mixed feelings. Alaga! She was a huge leopard with a fierce magic power rising all over her body. The deep magic emanating from her body almost made the fish faint and they scattered in surprise. What are you looking at? I came to take a bath. Alaga's tail slapped the water surface with a bang. There was no way Alaga's body would be submerged at that water level. The valley where Helmut had been floundering looked like a shallow spring. Alaga, looking down at her feet, opened her mouth wide. A fish I've never seen before, looks tasty. She put his head into the water. A cloudy splash like a water spray occurred. Soon, the green water surface turned a dark red color. Alaga emerged from the surface again, licking around her mouth. Tastes decent. While Helmut watched Alaga approaching, he clasped his face. Really, I almost died. His stiff body relaxed. His whole body ached as if he had been beaten. Helmut got up from his spot. Alaga, you were watching. Just as he was about to get a little emotional, Alaga cut him off. Why can't you do anything on your own? Disdain was evident. What are you doing? You can't do anything alone. The giant leopard pushed him with a thud. Helmut, who almost fell even with a slight push, frowned. His intention to say thank you faded away. If you're going to help, show up early. It would have been easier if he had crossed riding on Alaga. Helmut was disappointed, but he didn't say it out loud. If he said it, Alaga would get angry, thinking that he now considered him a ride. I'll go first. Helmut, who waved his hand, left the spot as if nothing had happened. Do you want me to follow you now? Alaga, who chuckled, soon began to move slowly. Chapter 4, Part 2. He had reached the other side where he had left a mark by going up the stream again. Helmut felt that Alaga was stealthily following him, even though she didn't show herself openly. She could have come with me. She seemed to dislike that. She doesn't like meeting humans, but she doesn't interfere either. She's not honest. Helmut decided to let it go. There was another problem. Am I going the right way? Helmut tilted his head. It should be nearby, but there were no signs of human habitation. Humans who tread on the ground with 2 feet and use tools leave traces in a different way from monsters. But Helmut couldn't find any special traces anywhere he looked. Perhaps he's already died. Or left. He felt a little disappointed. He had just narrowly escaped death. He had hoped to meet that human. Should I look around a bit more? After walking for about 10 more minutes, he saw something unfamiliar on the other side. A fence made by stacking branches of various kinds twice Helmut's height. Monsters don't build fences. It's a human trace. However, the joy of discovery was short-lived and Helmut became suspicious. It's too amateurish. If it were a monster living in the forest of roots, it could easily jump over such a fence. Was it not made to block? Helmut suddenly realized. It's a territory marker. If anyone broke that, the human would know. That someone had entered his territory. It's better to give him a warning. If the fence were to break, the human might feel uncomfortable, just like Ilaga didn't like it when Helmut touched her collection of miscellaneous items. Ilaga, I'll go on alone from here. If he took Ilaga with him, it could be taken as a sign of wanting to fight. Helmut, who had thrown the words, hesitated a bit and then put his hand on the fence. It was a fairly sturdy fence, woven out of large and small branches. Helmut, who had climbed the fence with strength in his hands and feet, did not jump down recklessly but carefully descended. That human had settled here for more than 10 years. He didn't know what kind of trap was inside. It's this way. In front of him, he saw a narrow path cut out of the tree artificially. Since he was not visiting with hostility, it was right to follow the path. But he also had to keep in mind the possibility that the other party could be hostile to visitors. Helmut walked along the path with tension. The surroundings were eerily quiet, strangely so. The feeling is strange. Helmut, whose spine was chilling, anxiously looked back. At that moment, thunk, something from above pounced on him, instantly freezing his body. Helmut barely turned his head sideways to prevent his face from hitting the ground. His breath was choked by the hand gripping the back of his neck. It happened just like his last hunt a few days ago, but this time, Helmut was on the receiving end. Whoa, a growling, rough voice echoed in his ears. Helmut's body tensed. However, the hand on his nape was not gentle. He couldn't move. Even if his neck were to snap like a twig in this position, he wouldn't be able to resist. Overwhelming difference in strength. His heart pounded as if it would burst. What's your name? His breath came in slightly. Helmut shouted urgently. Helmut, full name, I don't know. Who sent you? His grip tightened. The pain, unfamiliar, felt like it was about to crush his spine. His consciousness grew distant. Helmut barely managed to answer. I came on my own. The hand that had been holding the back of his neck disappeared in an instant. Helmut rolled to his feet. A cold blade touched the end of his neck. Don't attempt any futile tricks. The bearded, wrinkled face was that of an old man, but his eyes were as fierce as a beast's. A muscular giant of a man, strong enough for Ilaga to describe as a strong human. A shiver ran through him. Helmut trembled. Truly a strong human. Helmut, who had been abandoned in the forest of roots as a baby, had received Ilaga's protection, but he was familiar with the fierce gaze aimed at him. However, the pressure he felt from the figure in front of him was truly suffocating. Whether it was hostility or anything else, it didn't matter. It was an overwhelming pressure that defined his existence. A hoarse, rough voice emanated from the figure. If you want to live, answer my questions. Kid, how did you find your way here? Ilaga told me. She said you were here. He could answer the question because the pressure from the man had eased. Helmut blurted out urgently. Ilaga. The figure, as if pondering the name, furrowed his brow. The sharp aura around him gradually softened. After some thought, the man asked, Why did you come looking for me? The one in front of him was a human, and a particularly strong human. Helmut was curious about the fact that another human existed nearby. But strangely, Helmut was unable to respond to the stranger's words. The reason for coming, curiosity led him, and he met him. What do you want to do after meeting him? To become independent, you learn how to hunt, ask questions, think, and learn. Until now, Helmut had lived a simple life. Helmut, whose purpose was to meet him, lost his purpose after he met him. No, he didn't lose it. There was something essential beyond the curiosity that led him to him. As if he knew it, as if he didn't, some words got stuck in his throat. The reason for coming to him, hot confusion seized Helmut. Chapter 5, Part 1. Speak, the stranger didn't let Helmut remain silent. Even when dealing with a 10-year-old child in the forest of roots, one must not let their guard down. The blade that had been slightly away from his throat now pressed against it. Helmut hurriedly spoke. I've never seen a human here before. Helmut is 10 years old. So far, the only one he has spoken to is Ilaga. Expressing what he thinks and feels in a plausible way is a daunting task for Helmut. However, the meaning of his brief words seemed to be understood. The stranger sheathed his sword. He didn't seem pleased to see Helmut. With a look of annoyance, the stranger waved his hand. Get out of my territory. No, the stranger looked down at Helmut, who stubbornly retorted with an incredulous look. If you miss the warmth of humans, you've chosen the wrong person. What is the warmth of humans? Does it mean that humans are warm? Helmut asked out of curiosity. He couldn't understand such an abstract expression. The stranger scrutinized Helmut with a penetrating gaze and observing look. Are you a human born in this forest? No, I was sent here after I was born, probably because of the seed of darkness. Yes, most children would have been killed outright, so you must be of noble status. Helmut tilted his head, unable to understand what noble status meant. What Helmut knew about the human world came from the sporadic words thrown by Alaga. His knowledge was limited to the brief moment he spent in his mother's embrace and the memories of that time, holding only trivial knowledge. Whether you're the child of an enemy or an ally, all destinies belong to the past. You owe that leopard, not bad. The stranger, muttering as if talking to himself, suddenly asked, "Do you have something to prove your status? Something to prove my status?" When Helmut repeated the question word for word, the stranger raised his eyebrows. It was a frustrated look, as if looking at a child just learning to speak. "It's something you had when you were thrown into this forest." Helmut searched his memories. There might have been something else besides the loincloth that wrapped around him. Alaga would probably know. But given her nature, she probably didn't keep it well. "I'm not sure," meaning he wasn't certain. The stranger nodded his head as if he hadn't expected it. "I never thought I'd have a human guest in my lifetime. But since you're here, let me ask." And he asked Helmut with a heavy gaze, "Do you have a wish?" It sounded like he would grant it if there was a wish. Helmut swallowed dry saliva. It was a difficult question because it was vague. Helmut blurted out as best he could. He hadn't expected those words to pop out of his mouth. "I want to leave the forest." According to Alaga's words, this human might know how to leave the forest. Helmut hadn't thought about it until now. But the moment he let those words out of his mouth, a heavy lump hit somewhere inside him. A vacuum in his chest rang like a bell. Helmut discovered a longing he didn't know he had. He wanted to leave the forest. Like a salmon swimming upstream, it was instinct, returning to his origin. No, maybe he just wished for it at this moment. But why? There's no particular dissatisfaction with his current life. It's a familiar life that's neither harsh nor difficult. However, humans are not creatures satisfied merely by the resolution of physiological needs. Something more was needed. That was the case for Helmut too. A struggle, like constantly pouring questions and striving for something, a struggle with that something unknown. It could be natural. Having been abandoned since birth, he had no choice but to live in the forest of roots. This is not a human's territory. Helmut is human. Humans should live in the realm of humans. Alaga's attitude was ambiguous. She didn't provide detailed information or push Helmut towards the human world. But she always subtly reminded Helmut of his humanity and the existence of the outside world. Was it gradually being painted in Helmut's mind? His eyes became moist. Helmut, pressing against his teary eyes, said, I lived in the forest of roots since I was abandoned as a baby. So, what's in the outside world? What's different between this forest of roots and the human world? Helmut asked. The stern gaze of the stranger softened a bit. The world of humans is not as beautiful or peaceful as you think. The outer world is not without its dangers. Humans there lack sharp claws and teeth, and their bodies are fragile. However, with weak bodies they are cruel and know how to unite. Helmut grinned. If the human world with its lack of sharp claws and teeth and weak bodies is less safe than the forest of roots, the stranger's words didn't sound convincing. Chapter 5, Part 2. The reason you were abandoned in this forest is because of the seed of darkness. As long as that's inside you, even if you escape from this forest, you might be chased and fight with humans and meet death. Do you still want to go to the outside world? Said the stranger. Helmut nodded without hesitation. There was no need to ponder. After all, a choice is one of two similar options. Helmut thought at first that his destiny was to live and die in Alaga's territory. Of course, that might not be bad. Living and dying like the monsters that were born and grew up in the forest of roots. It's not despair because it's natural. But what if there's another choice? The moment engraved in the distant memories occasionally flashed back. Helmut remembered his mother, the blonde woman who embraced him and shed tears. If he didn't remember anything, it would be different. That memory sometimes surged and touched him. The place where Helmut fell from that comfortable embrace was the forest of roots, spoken of as a place no one could escape. It wasn't premature hope. Helmut had no childish optimism. Instead, he had determination and resilience. If there was a path to take, he had to take it. It brightly emerged as a mission. Helmut held his head high. Still, I want to leave, he squinted and asked. Why don't you want to leave? Why are you living here? If I go, the world will be stained in blood. The stranger spoke in a low and heavy voice like the echo of a gong. If I go to the human world, I must duly revenge against those who sent me here. For revenge, I will stain this hand with the blood of countless people. Regret was in his eyes. But my age, 96, I've already seen enough blood to become a river. Even if I do that, what will be left in these hands aside from the anger turned to ash? I don't know. Helmut shook his head from side to side, taking the stranger's monologue as a question. Anyway, I want to leave the forest. The more he repeated that, the stronger his longing became. A sensation as if the blurry world was becoming clear, it was soon engraved in Helmut as a goal. Something sat in the empty spot. A purpose of life that he hadn't had until now. Whether it's possible or not wasn't important. After all, it's a miracle that he's living and breathing here. It was a longing that ignited within him. It was a spark he didn't know existed. Heat rose in Helmut's eyes, which had been calm enough to feel empty. Sensing his change, the stranger nodded his head. I don't know exactly how to get out because I didn't want to leave. But I know someone who might know. Who is that? Is there another human? Helmut's eyes widened. I can't tell you yet. The word yet implied someday. Helmut understood that. The way to the sacred barrier is far. And the one who knows that way is dangerous. He won't treat you kindly just because you're a human being or because you're young. He enjoys human flesh, so he might cut off your flesh alive and eat it. What should I do? You have to become stronger. That short proposition sounded like the truth. Helmut knows what it means to become stronger. Growth. As time passed, or by consuming the core of other creatures, monsters became stronger. Humans also become stronger by eating cores. However, humans can't accumulate magic power as much as monsters. Magic is a power that doesn't go well with humans. If you keep accumulating magic, you'll go crazy or your body will explode. Helmut's magic power was minimal, just for eating and living. He learned how to hunt, but that was recent. No matter how much he had the seed of darkness and a trained body, Helmut was just a human child. At the bottom of the food chain of the Forest of Roots, a child who would have been eaten at any time if Alaga wasn't there. How can I become stronger? If you do as I say, the stranger spoke decisively. I guarantee that you can't cross the sacred barrier in your current state. Helmut's eyes widened. It sounded as if he could cross the sacred barrier if he met certain conditions. Crossing the sacred barrier was something that had been impossible until now, but the stranger in front of him was discussing that possibility. How can I cross the sacred barrier? A question returned to a question. Have you ever consumed the cores of other monsters? No, that would make things easier. The stranger, frowning and given a look of contempt, suddenly grabbed the back of Helmut's neck. Before that, I need to fix your appearance first. What are you doing? Smack. A huge fist struck the back of his head. It stung. Helmut clutched his head. His pitch-black eyes glared vividly at the stranger. He's got a personality. It's better than being flabby. A swordsman is supposed to be like that. If you want to return to the human world, you have to become a human first. The Helmut reflected in his eyes was an entirely unpolished child who had just stepped out of the realm of beasts. Fortunately, he wasn't ferocious. The stranger declared confidently, I will make you a human. Chapter 6, Part 1. Helmut didn't understand. I'm a human, so why are you trying to make me into one? But the situation was clearly unfolding on its own. From that day on, Helmut lived with the stranger. The man who revealed his name as Darien ordered Helmut to clean the old cabin. Helmut muttered as he swept the dust for the first time in his life. Helmut had no concept of hygiene. He didn't have a home, maybe a territory. He had a place to stay, but he didn't settle down there, whether it was in a cave or a makeshift tree nest. Humans originally lived like this. Darien was unfriendly, and he seemed to lack talent in explaining things. He filled most of his explanations with, humans do it this way, so you should too. If a house gets dusty and dirty, humans clean it. Under the pretext of teaching cleaning, Darien showed Helmut how to use a broom and a mop. But looking at how dirty the house was, had Darien not cleaned it all this time, Helmut's sharp observation was blocked by Darien's words, so you don't want to leave the forest. He didn't give a reason, he just commanded. Helmut had no choice. As Helmut swept the inside of the house with an old broom and mopped with wide, damp leaves, the cabin, which had cobwebs hanging all over it, became noticeably cleaner. While Helmut was cleaning the house, Darien was making something. Before long, in one corner of the cabin, a soft nest made of slender branches and grass appeared. It's your bed. Lying down, it felt cozy like a new nest. It was different from the feeling when he slept leaning against a laga while getting soaked in dew. Rest was short-lived as Darien shouted at Helmut, who was lying down. Young man, get up. There's still work to be done. Darien's voice contained his unique oppressive energy. Helmut, who was suddenly awakened, got up. Darien found clothes from somewhere and put them on Helmut, who was almost naked with only an old cloth around his waist. Helmut twisted his body uncomfortably. This is tight and uncomfortable. Humans have to wear clothes. There aren't many, so be careful not to tear them. Darien spoke as if he wouldn't let it go if Helmut tore the clothes. The threat was not just words. Among the necessities of life, once the problem of wearing and sleeping was solved, the next was food. Even though he was a human without any seed of darkness, Darien wasn't overly concerned about what he ate. He had an efficient body that could last for several days with a small amount of food. However, that didn't mean he could live without eating. What have you been eating until now, hunted meat or forest fruits? Darien nodded his head and said, I'll teach you what you can eat and what you can't, and how to make what you can't eat edible. The magic in the Forest of Roots contaminated plants with toxicity. Although various plants grew in the Forest of Roots, there were fewer edible ones compared to the outside world. Water represents purification here. Even in roots, water doesn't get contaminated. Remove the nucleus and wash it with water. He took a whole root plant and cut it in half. Inside the nucleus, the core of the darkness was embedded like a black seed. Darien removed the core and washed it thoroughly with water. Try eating it. The white flesh of the root was chewy in his mouth. It had a sweet taste on the tip of his moist tongue. It was a cloudy taste compared to meat or forest fruits, but it felt rich in nutrients. For Helmut, a meal was an act of supplying nutrients. As long as it didn't taste bad, he thought it was fine. If it's delicious, all the better. Helmut concentrated and listened carefully to Darien's words. After that, Darien taught him a few more things that could be food. The lessons were certainly effective. Once Helmut followed Darien's words, he gained the understanding that he could obtain something from anything. That understanding brought patience to Helmut. Human knowledge is definitely useful to me. For now, only Darien could teach Helmut that. Chapter 6, Part 2. Helmut, carrying a water bucket as instructed by Darien, descended to the water's edge when he heard heavy footsteps approaching. He bent over to pour water when a massive leopard playfully flicked the surface with her tail. Splish, water splattered, and Helmut wiped his face in annoyance. What are you doing? What does it look like, trying to amuse you? Darien told me to fetch water. Why would you listen to a human like him when you don't even listen to me? Somehow he ended up becoming independent from Alaga, unable to speak properly anymore. Feeling apologetic, Helmut said, he taught me good things and he said he would make me stronger. To leave the Forest of Roots, one must become stronger. Darien might have been lying, but Helmut vaguely sensed that he was not the type to deceive and manipulate others cunningly. So it probably wasn't a lie. You want to become stronger to leave the forest? I am a human, aren't I? Alaga's words always reminded him of that. Alaga looked at Helmut with a somewhat discontented expression. Do you think there will be something good outside? As a baby, Helmut, who had a seed of darkness, had been abandoned in the Forest of Roots. Returning wouldn't change anything. Once his true identity was revealed, humans would treat him as an enemy and try to kill him. Leaving the Forest of Roots wouldn't provide him with a better place to go. However, Helmut simply redirected the question. There's nothing good about staying here. Living in the Forest of Roots meant just surviving. Helmut now had a goal. With a goal in mind, Helmut's life felt more worth living. Leaving Alaga, who had become mute, Helmut silently filled the bucket. I'm going, see you next time. Helmut, who had picked up the bucket, waved his hand. Alaga watched the departing boy blankly. Well, take care. A moment later, Alaga muttered discontentedly. The giant leopard, who had been casting side glances at the boy who left, eventually wandered away, wavering. Splash, cold water splashed over his body, instantly jolting his fading consciousness back to full alertness. Darien was watching him with his arms crossed. Straighten your back. For several hours now, Helmut had maintained the horse-riding posture, bending both legs and extending his arms forward in what they called the horse stance. His limbs trembled, racked with cramps, and his body was drenched in sweat. Maintain this position for another 10 minutes, Darien declared without mercy as he sat down on a chair. It was rigorous training for a 10-year-old, but Darien had a way of motivating Helmut with just one sentence. Don't you want to leave the forest? It was an effective reminder. Darien had subjected Helmut to various grueling and bizarre tasks under the guise of training. He made him repeatedly throw a thick branch and retrieve it from the dark hillside, tossing a leather ball down a steep hill and making him pick it up several times. It pushed his endurance to the limit. He had experienced near-death situations before, but this was an entirely different feeling. I feel like I'm going to die. Helmut had never received such training before. He's just a 10-year-old child. It's natural to be hard, but I can endure it. Helmut endured to the end. If patience was a talent, Helmut was a genius. It was also a learned behavior. Having grown up in the harsh environment of the Forest of Roots from infancy, Helmut had endured many hardships. He's holding up quite well. Someone who survived in the Forest of Roots must be different. Darien raised an eyebrow as he watched Helmut, who was struggling to keep his trembling arms up. He had innate strength, no doubt influenced by Alaga's protection or the Seed of Darkness, but surviving in the Forest of Roots from the very beginning had toughened him mentally and physically. He had determination, too. In his pitch-black eyes, there was an unyielding spirit that was anything but ordinary. That was something an ordinary boy could never possess. If he didn't have the Seed of Darkness, he would have grown up to be a swordsman who would leave his mark on the world. But no matter how good the raw material, it would remain a lump of iron if not carefully forged and sharpened. Darien intended to refine Helmut like a sturdy and sharp blade. He didn't know if he would be alive by the time this good quality lump of iron became a sword, but meeting Helmut in this cursed forest was an opportunity given to him. An opportunity to do something meaningful in life. An opportunity to leave something behind. The more remarkable the achievements, the more he hoped to leave his mark on the world. Darien de Firth, the Sword Star, was no exception. "Didn't I tell you to keep your arms horizontal?" Darien yelled out loud. As night fell, the training came to an end. Helmut, who had collapsed on the floor, spat out a thunderous sound. "Today's training is just the beginning. As your body gets used to it, I will increase the intensity of the training, so be prepared." Darien had made his judgment, looking at Helmut's skeleton, muscles, and physical condition. But for the first time in his life, Helmut felt dizzy. Is this just the beginning? His entire body ached and throbbed. Helmut frowned, his fatigue evident. He wanted to lie down and sleep. "Do you intend to go to bed with that smelly body?" Darien turned Helmut around. He gestured towards the bucket of water that Helmut had scooped up earlier. "Wash up and then sleep." Helmut looked at Darien with an expressionless face. His eyes revealed an underlying defiance. "Yes." Helmut was gradually getting used to the polite way of speaking. Gritting his teeth and holding back his anger, Helmut took off his clothes and poured water from the bucket to wash his body. It felt similar to when he was dunked into the water up to his hair, clinging to Alaga's tail, who loved to bathe. His damp body dried quickly after shaking it a few times. Helmut changed into new clothes that Darien had given him. Only then was he able to finish the cumbersome process and lay his tired body on the newly made bed. The training that lasted all day exhausted Helmut that day. The soft bed which he was lying on for the first time was unfamiliar yet comfortable. Chapter 7, Part 1, Wake Up. Before the sun rose, Helmut jolted awake at a thunderous shout. Without even rubbing his eyes, a water jug was placed in front of Helmut as he got up from his bed. "Fill it with water every morning and evening. It's your daily task." The tone was commanding. "Does this man even sleep?" Helmut thought as he picked up the bucket. As Helmut, still half asleep, left the house, a loud noise struck the back of his head. "If you don't come back quickly, there's no meal." Helmut, who had gone all the way down to the water's edge, avoiding the carnivorous fish and filled the bucket, stopped in his tracks instead of returning. His anger flared as he woke up. He had barely slept, and he was kicked out of bed from early morning. Standing still, Helmut kicked the ground with an irritated expression. "Why do I have to do this?" Alaga didn't raise him with tenderness, but he had not been so oppressive like this. Compared to Darien, she took care of him meticulously. Darien, under the guise of training, tortured him all day, dictating tasks from morning till night. For the first time in his life, Helmut felt the injustice of a situation. "I have to speak up." With a firm resolution, Helmut hoisted the filled water jug and walked back to the hut. It didn't take long, but wisps of smoke were rising from the hut when he arrived. "Is there a fire?" Helmut, tilting his head in confusion, was gestured by Darien when he reached the hut. "Come and sit down." A crude iron pot was placed over a blazing fire in the yard. Inside, a bubbling liquid emitted an enticing aroma. The moment he smelled it, a growl emanated from his stomach. It was surprisingly hunger-inducing, a tantalizing smell. His cheeks tingled. Feeling saliva pooling in his mouth, Helmut clenched his lips with his tongue, as if he had never been this hungry. "Eat. In the forest of roots, you can't find a proper dish like this." Darien poured the contents into a bowl made of sturdy fruit peel. He called the slightly brownish, viscous liquid soup. Helmut, rushing to taste it, burned his tongue. Darien handed him a spoon carved from wood. "Eat it with this." "You clumsy fellow." Helmut discreetly observed Darien, who was eating meat soup, and followed suit. Scooping a spoonful and blowing on it to cool, he put it in his mouth. The soup, with a mix of meat and fat, moistened his palate. "It tastes really good." Helmut blinked his eyes. A shiver ran down his spine. It felt like he was tasting something this delicious for the first time in his life. Was human food always like this? "How did you make this?" "Huh, I put chopped meat in yesterday's roots and cooked it well." If you camp a lot, you get used to cooking. Even with simple ingredients, if cooked well, it becomes quite edible. "I'll teach you gradually." Encouraged by these words, Helmut looked at Darien. Darien, raising an eyebrow, looked at Helmut eating with unexpected interest. A boy who grew up alone in the forest like an abandoned orphan. He probably never tasted human food. Even Darien's iron-like heart softened. Forgetting the whip after handing him a carrot, Helmut simply forgot his grievances. He had never eaten home-cooked food, let alone tasted such a simple joy from a meat soup. The feeling lifted Helmut's spirits. If he could eat such food, if he could make such food, maybe following Darien's orders isn't so bad after all. "When I go out into the human world, I can eat even more delicious food like this." A determined resolution flashed in Helmut's determined eyes, like digging with a shovel firmly. Of course, what followed afterward was more grueling training. Chapter 7, Part 2, Focus properly, snap. As Darien struck Helmut's head with his fist, Helmut's gaze changed. Right then, a mixture of frustration and protest burst forth. My posture is correct. Several days had passed and he had started to voice his complaints. This too was a change. What's the problem? He was moving accurately as instructed, albeit distracted. Helmut revealed a rebellious look in his eyes. His complaint was valid. It was an achievement in just 3 days to be able to swing the wooden sword in the same motion without disrupting his posture or deviating an inch. It's hard to expect faster progress from a 10-year-old boy. If anyone saw him would have exclaimed that he was a genius. Of course, Helmut was unaware of this fact, but Darien knew. Even knowing that, his attitude remained unyielding. After all, a sword must be hammered relentlessly when it's heated to become strong and sharp. You fool, just having the right posture doesn't make everything work. Then what? Do I have to explain everything to you? Yes. At the curt answer, Darien stroked his chin, taken aback. The more you look at him, the more peculiar he seems. The seed of darkness makes one's character cruel and vicious. Moreover, a boy raised in the wild, if he had a good temperament, that would be even more surprising. In Darien's eyes, Helmut was somewhat patient and strangely satisfied with trivial things. Thinking back, even comparing him to other children of the same age, he seemed mature. In such aspects, if one admired him for being mature, it was well earned here. His gentle nature was not the case. He had his stubbornness and personality. If he was not convinced, he wouldn't back down. Well then, I'll tell you, one thing is certain, a disciple should not be left to crawl at the master. Snap! Ah, Helmut yelled. He had become more dramatic. Darien struck Helmut with the snatched wooden sword once more. Then, clenching his fist, he asked, "Do you understand the difference?" "What difference?" Darien, looking at Helmut fixedly, swung the wooden sword again. Helmut raised both arms and covered his head swiftly. Snap! The wooden sword lightly struck Helmut's forearm, which was covering his head. "That's 3 times. Do you understand the difference in these 3 times?" "I don't know." As soon as he bluntly spat out his words, his stomach growled. "If you don't want to starve for dinner, answer politely and think." As Darien scolded, Helmut's momentum diminished a bit. Threatening him with meals worked quite well with Helmut. Every time he ate, no matter what he made, Helmut ate as if possessed, which made Darien wonder if he might have talent in cooking. The intensity is different, the speed, and the place where you hit are also different. The answer that Helmut sullenly put out was that. While speaking, Helmut suddenly realized. Darien's movements were very consistent, smooth, and free of any clutter, almost like human movements. However, the power and speed contained in them were different. Sometimes slow, like a crawling caterpillar, then suddenly fast, like a lightning strike. One continuous flow penetrates through all those movements. After several days of training, Helmut's movements became similar to Darien's. But could Helmut do it like that too? The answer is simply no. Do you understand now? Yes, but how? Understand. It was a firm one-word answer. Imitating without understanding is useless. Understand the body. Further, understand the mind. In other words, understand the sword. Let your sword extend beyond your body into the mind. When you feel like you control your sword as you do your body, only then can you say you've learned it. Whether fast or slow, strong or weak, connect the same flow without deviation, but you must understand what that sameness is. To do that, you must constantly look into and understand the flow of your movements. Darien's words continued without interruption. The energetic voice seemed to be engraved deep into the brain beyond the eardrum. When you feel like you're controlling your sword like you're controlling your body, you can say that you've learned it. Whether it's fast or slow, strong or weak, it continues the same flow without disruption, but you have to know what that sameness is. To do that, you have to devote your heart and soul to unfolding that one action. Helmut chewed on Darien's words. He looked down at the floor and was lost in thought. Darien poured out his admonition as if he was waiting. But look at what you're doing. Aren't you just swinging your sword like chopping wood without thinking? It's not about imitating. If you don't constantly look into and understand the flow of your movements, you're not a swordsman, you're just a woodcutter swinging an axe. What's the point of repeating the same action hundreds, thousands of times without thinking? Those who swing their swords without thinking ultimately rely on their trained bodies. Such guys can't break their limits. They can be first class, but they can't be more than that. Darien's standard for first class was extremely high, but Darien was a swordsman who surpassed that first class. Helmut was receiving the teachings of a swordsman that any young boy learning the sword would want to receive. Darien's standard was bound to be extremely high. Darien didn't accept Helmut out of boredom or sympathy. There's no need for leniency in teaching the sword. People have to be relentlessly pushed and pushed to become useful. Especially if you want to inherit the sword from the Sword Saint, you naturally have to endure such hardships. Chapter 8 Part 1 If the sword is in your hand, focus all your attention on the sword. Never slack off or think of anything else. The sword is honest. It responds in kind to those who pour their hearts out to it. Listening to the words pouring down like a torrent, Helmut nodded silently. It was a straightforward explanation that he had no choice but to follow. If the words were correct, he would follow. Thinking about why was a habit of Helmut. If the explanation for why was convincing, there was no objection. Rather than succumbing to fear or pressure, he separated emotions and followed the given answers. At the mere age of 10, Helmut could do what was challenging even for adults. Do you understand? Yes. Helmut, responding with enthusiasm, received the wooden sword. As he prepared to take his stance and immerse himself in training again, Darien spoke up. Don't you want to get stronger a bit faster and leave this forest? The forest of roots was a familiar ground for Helmut. However, the expectations of the human world were indeed alluring. Since receiving Darien's teachings, unfamiliar emotions such as impatience, anxiety, and eagerness had welled up. As Helmut nodded, Darien spoke solemnly. Your success depends on you. Don't think that just doing what you're told is enough. You must strive for more on your own. Helmut absorbed Darien's words. Ilaga said Darien is an exceptional warrior even among humans. To become stronger, he had to learn from a strong one, just like he learned hunting from Ilaga. Darien was the role model he had to follow. Helmut knew this instinctively. The next day and the day after, the training continued. Helmut's schedule strictly followed Darien's will. It usually boiled down to eating, sleeping, training, and learning in a compressed manner. He wakes up in the morning, fetches water, eats, and starts the day's work. The aspect of training often changed. Some days he repeated one posture over and over. Some days he learned about the human body and vital points, and practiced how to suppress the opponent with his body. Some days he held a wooden sword and faced Darien's bare hands. It was more of a one-sided contest than a sparring session, because Helmut was beaten one-sidedly. After the practice ended and Darien leaned back and took a deep breath, he asked the exhausted Helmut, "Do you understand why you failed in your attack? It seemed like I would fail no matter how I attacked." When Helmut spoke sullenly, Darien immediately grabbed his head. "Thump, you foolish child. Didn't you think it all? I thought a lot." Although the tone was calm, Helmut was quite frustrated. What doesn't work simply doesn't work. A while ago, Darien confidently declared, "Stand in place and use only your right hand. Come at me as much as you want." Helmut was supposed to win if he moved him or touched the wooden sword to vital points. However, Helmut was defeated in a seemingly unfair manner. If he exposed a gap, it was a trap. Whatever he tried, Helmut fell on the ground defeated. After a while, his whole body became covered in dirt. It felt like being ridiculed. You thought too much. Moreover, your body didn't follow your thoughts. Your movements are rash and sloppy. You can compensate for immaturity with physical ability, but even that has limits. Effective attacks often pass by a needle's difference. Your body's balance, the strength of you and your opponent, the movement of muscles, speed. You have to see through all of that and make the optimal judgment. The judgment should not be slow or wrong. If you can make a proper judgment, you will be able to fight and win against an enemy stronger than you. What you do with me is just a training, so it's okay to make mistakes in judgment. But when you face an enemy, a wrong judgment could cost you your life. Helmut narrowed his eyes. What Darien was saying made sense. However, it was easier said than done. Darien was talking about a level that Helmut found obscure. Just blindly rushing in wouldn't get him there. Even if he listened, it wouldn't make him slap his knee and exclaim, "Ah, I get it." Helmut knew that to learn what he didn't know, he had to ask. So how do you make quick and accurate judgments? The best thing is experience. During practice, try various approaches. After the practice, reflect on how you attacked and how I reacted, what mistakes you made and what was more effective. Keep pondering in your mind. If you continue doing that, eventually you'll be able to make the best judgments instinctively. It seemed like that damn think was the key. Helmut nodded heavily. Do humans in the outside world all learn swordsmanship like this? It was more troublesome than he initially thought. Darien's movements were as precise as he described. Darien skillfully blocked Helmut's attacks with minimal movements and used the force to counterattack. It was different from the instinctive combat styles of Ilaga and other monsters. Are humans clever in combat because of this style, even if they are physically weak? If that was indeed the human combat style, the human world might not be easy to deal with. In this way, Helmut began to have misconceptions. Darien had misunderstood, not knowing that he was a renowned swordsman in the human world. Chapter 8, Part 2, Days passed quickly. Life with Darien was unfamiliar and diverse. It was a complex and challenging life compared to living with Ilaga. Though freedom was limited, there was much to learn. Helmut learned basic knowledge about the human world, how to read and write, find food, cook, build a fire, sew, and make necessary tools, among many other practical skills needed for living in the forest of roots and beyond. He dug up clay to make clay pots, and he also pulled out tough threads from tree trunks. Through these he fished, occasionally shot arrows to hunt and set traps. He cooked meat and trimmed and cut fur to make clothes. Darien's teachings on human hunting techniques were very useful for Helmut, who didn't have strong claws, fangs, or a massive physique like Ilaga. Now, Helmut could survive and provide for himself no matter where he ended up. Helmut was like a large and seamless vessel. Even if the size of the entrance was limited and some things leaked out when poured, everything that entered became his own. From the time he met Alaga as a baby to when he met Darien. He didn't realize it himself, but Helmut was fortunate. It was extremely rare to receive help from someone in this forest. About 2 weeks into living with Darien, Helmut gained his freedom. Sometimes taking breaks enhances the effectiveness of training. Instead of training separately, take some rest. Darien left the cabin, leaving behind his stern advice and headed somewhere from the morning. Helmut, who had a good sleep for the first time in a long while, groggily left the cabin around noon. It's good not to train, but there was a sense of emptiness. His gaze lingered on the wooden sword, but he quickly diverted his attention. Today was a day off. The tightly packed schedule wasn't as unbearable as it used to be. Despite harboring the seeds of darkness, Helmut was adaptable, born with a strong disposition to roll with the punches and get used to things. Hey. As he descended to the water's edge, a leopard appeared from somewhere, swaying. Alaga, hello, Helmut waved his hand. Since her territory was nearby, he didn't think it was a farewell. Still, it's nice to see after such a long time. They weren't exactly friends, but haven't they been living together closely until recently? Helmut often couldn't deny the emptiness that was pushing in. Especially, he missed that warm and soft fur. Alaga might have thought it was good not to have to take care of the annoying kid. Looking at Helmut wearing a well-made black fur coat, Alaga sneered. You're a human without fur, are you imitating a beast? Humans have to wear clothes. The flesh is weak, that's why you need it. It's a lowly species that doesn't even have rough skin like snakes. But it's good to wear clothes. Anyway, you had a good meal, right? From time to time, a hot animal carcass placed near the hut was noticed to be Alaga's doing. The prey caught by Alaga was all big, and Darien and Helmut ate full for several days and still had leftovers. Darien only said about Alaga bringing prey, it's like she left her child for me to look after. In return, Helmut took out what he had brought. I made this, want to try it. What is this dead rat-like thing? It's a dead rat. It's delicious, here, try it. Alaga took the meat and mushroom mixture offered by Helmut as if it were a bitter pill and immediately spat it out. Gross, she spat it out so forcefully that fragments flew to the ground. Helmut grumbled in disappointment. I made it with great effort, what a waste. Why does it taste so disgusting? Have you turned completely human now making meat like this? I've been a human from the beginning. Well, that kind of food is bad anyway, so eat it alone, don't bring it to me. Chapter 9, Part 1, the meat that was brought was in 2 pieces. Helmut ate the remaining piece as if to show off. Alaga squinted as if she couldn't eat his food. The moment he swallowed the food, Alaga suddenly spoke. You seem to have grown a bit taller. Really? It's my growth period. Helmut ran his hand through his hair. With regular training, eating, and sleeping, it seemed his height was growing well. The face that had been merely cute with a slightly chubby baby look became colder, transforming into a handsome appearance. However, it was only a subtle change. Alaga chuckled, at best you've grown from an acorn to a chestnut. I'm going to grow more. How much can a human grow anyway? Compared to Alaga's massive body, Helmut seemed like a bite-sized snack. Even Darien with his large stature appeared like a rabbit in front of Alaga. A sudden memory crossed Helmut's mind. Darien mentioned that he owes to Alaga. Is that human's name Darien? What happened between you and Darien? Judging by the fact that she didn't even know his name, they didn't seem particularly close. They lived nearby, but encounters were rare. Alaga bluntly replied, I allowed him to live here. When he settled near my territory, I could have driven him away, but I talked to him and decided to let him be. That's how he could live here. You didn't want to fight? Thud. At the sharp question, her thick tail hit Helmut's head. I am Alaga, I have no reason to avoid a fight with anyone. Alaga, who was shouting angrily, hesitated as if she was pricked by something. Well, there is. Fighting with him for no reason could make other creatures target me if I get injured. Why bother with such things? In fact, she didn't think about anything at that time. Alaga just made up a reason. Of course, if that human caused trouble, I would have driven him away. But when I went to see him, he asked for permission to live here. It wasn't a particularly polite request, but the opponent didn't seem hostile. There was no need to fight if he didn't show hostility to take over the territory. Since he's a human, he wouldn't need much territory. He bent a little first, and if this side accepted it, that was it. There was no need to fight. Of course, it was a rare calculation for Alaga. Well, having one human around wouldn't hurt. That disgusting snake monster hopes me and the human fight and become bloody. It's a perfect opportunity to control my territory. Disgusting snake, are you talking about Naho? In the Forest of Roots, there were monsters holding large territories in each zone. Alaga occupied a large area in the central region of the forest, while Naho resided in the eastern region. Despite not knowing their relationship with other monsters, Alaga particularly disliked Naho of the east. Naturally, monsters with known names were at the top of the food chain in the Forest of Roots. Naho wanted to eat that human, but he also hesitated to fight him. He couldn't retaliate against the opponent who had destroyed his human farm. Human farm, something like that, Alaga mumbled and turned her head. Helmut briefly pondered the unsettling word, but soon shifted his attention elsewhere. Naho and Alaga were monsters who considered each other equals. Despite hating each other, if they fought, one of them would die or be significantly injured. If that happened, the survivor would become a target for other monsters. Therefore, they avoided provoking each other and kept a wary distance. Naho is fierce and cunning. If he suffered damage from humans, he would never let it go. Both Naho and Alaga avoided unnecessary fights. Who do you think would have won if you and Darien fought? Helmut didn't hide his curiosity. For a 10-year-old boy, it's important to determine who is stronger and weaker. Alaga growled as if to say that she was obviously stronger. I don't know, but Alaga was a strangely honest leopard at that time. Monsters like me instinctively know whether the opponent is stronger or weaker. However, when the opponent is human, unlike us who can feel the strength in the aura, humans are good at concealing their strength. I have a feeling, but I can't be sure. There must have been many who attacked that human ended up dead. The important thing is that even Naho, who enjoys human flesh, couldn't touch him. Not knowing meant that there was a possibility of defeat. In the Forest of Roots, even monsters considered to be at the top of the hierarchy couldn't touch that human. Recalling what Darien had said, he seemed to have fallen into the Forest of Roots because of a trap. Although he came into the forest already strong, Darien was still human. Humans were different from monsters. They were inherently weak. Helmut, without Alaga's care, would never have survived, but there was a human here that even the monsters were wary of. Chapter 9, Part 2, Helmut felt his skin shivering. An exception that turned fixed notions into prejudices. Could he become like Darien? Why didn't you tell me that Darien was living here all this time? He's old, and I thought he'd die soon. He lives as if he's already dead. But perhaps because he was particularly strong, he was able to last this long. Alaga murmured, absorbed in her own thoughts. But it's surprising that he accepted you. Humans tend to live in groups, even more so in the Forest of Roots. Because they're weak, but he lived alone, he doesn't seem to like humans much. Doesn't like them? Helmut tilted his head. At least he didn't seem to dislike teaching Helmut. If he had wanted to be with other humans, wouldn't he have completely done something about that human farm? When that human appeared, I expected him to destroy Naho's bad hobby, but he stopped halfway. What's a human farm? Alaga seemed to realize something and spoke with a grimace. It's dirty and disgusting. Alaga, being a leopard, had a delicate stomach. It might be an exaggeration, but why hide it? Helmut asked again. What do you mean by dirty and disgusting? Curious? Yeah. Okay, then I'll show you. Alaga's eyes showed a determined look. Her thick tail wrapped around Helmut's body like a snake and lifted him up. Sneak a peek, but don't make a fuss. There are plenty of humans there, so even if you're curious, watch quietly. Got it. We have to go discreetly because it's Naho's territory. Besides, now is the time when he's starting to sleep a lot, so it's the right time. The Forest of Roots, which belongs to a cold zone, was about to be swept by a cold wave. Soon it will be winter. Alaga, who had hung Helmut on her tail, kicked off and ran. The direction was east and the leap distance was tremendous. Every time she jumped, her huge body seemed to fly, cutting through the air. With Alaga's foot hitting the ground, the shock reverberated through Helmut's insides. Helmut's face turned pale. Alaga warned him. If you open your mouth, you'll bite your tongue. Helmut had to endure a challenging time similar to training. Quite a long time. When Alaga stood still and gently placed Helmut on the ground, he covered his mouth, feeling the urge to vomit. Look carefully. Fortunately, he had good recovery. After regaining his senses, Helmut looked around. The place they stood was a cliff surrounded by thick bushes. Alaga, bending her body, extended her head over the edge of the cliff. Helmut also crouched, lowering his body to follow her. Below, through the gaps in the forest, cabins were visible. Dozens of cabins, similar to Darien's dwelling, were tightly clustered together, and there were moving creatures. Yes, they were humans. Helmut's eyes widened. It was strange. Humans wearing clothes of a different material than their own, thinner than leather, carrying water buckets on their heads or carrying something. Although they were the same species, they formed a group. For the first time, Helmut realized what the word group meant. Yes, that's a human farm. Helmut tilted his head. The expression human farm, it's strange. A farm is a place where humans raise crops or livestock. If humans live in a group, it should be described as a village. Why is it a farm? Look at it. A skinny man who had been moving a pile of cut logs stumbled. He seemed weaker than the rabbit monster Helmut had caught a while ago. In this forest, he was undoubtedly an underpowered individual, someone who could never survive alone. Whip. The scattered pieces of wood spilled on the ground. The giant man standing next to him shouted, swinging a whip toward him. The skinny man, opening his mouth wide, hugged himself. It sounded like a scream. He gathered the wood pieces and quickly moved away. Similar-sized men around him silently continued their work. It was a familiar sight for them. His forehead wrinkled. There is no place better suited to the phrase survival of the fittest than the forest of roots, but somehow the scene was surprisingly unsettling. Why are they tormenting him? Because he can't do his job properly. Helmut kept his mouth shut and watched. The atmosphere was tense and stern. From the next building a door opened and fair, delicate-looking women poured out. Helmut realized that was classified as a woman, like his mother. The same human but a different gender. Strange, isn't it? Yeah, Chapter 10 Part 1 Helmut is a male. Darien, the first human he saw in the forest, is also a male. The pale, round, and slender women with delicate frames felt somewhat strange. They were treated differently from the small men who were obviously laborers at first glance. However, they all looked unhealthy, pale and fearful expressions. A few large men moved them to another building as if they were herding sheep. They firmly closed the door and even bolted it. "Is there a woman you like?" Alaga asked, making a growling sound with her breath. "Like? I don't even know those humans." Alaga realized that Helmut was too young to expect any reaction. "Come to think of it, you're still a kid. What are you talking about? But why are those women crowding into the house?" "It's daytime. When men work outside, women work inside. But those pale and beautiful women didn't seem to be doing any work at all. They were like the ruling class of humans. Those women are offerings." Offerings? Naho prefers human females with tender meat and good digestion. Those females with pale, beautiful skin and soft bodies without muscles are offered to Naho. If they're too small, there's nothing to eat, so they're raised until they mature. That's why women who are to be sacrificed are kept separately like that. So those women are livestock born and raised in the forest of roots. There's only one human village here. They live safely, eating and drinking to their heart's content for a short life, but before they become adults, they become a meal for Naho. He slowly pushes the prey into his mouth, enjoying the fear and pain. He's like a pervert, Alaga frowned. Helmut stared intently at the building where the women were confined. It felt strange. Living so openly in a group in the forest of roots, monsters prefer weak and tender humans as prey. There's no way they would leave them alone, if there weren't a blatant guardian of a powerful monster. So Naho protects that village in exchange for the women as sacrifices. But it's actually the human guy who maintains it. There's a human who rules that village. All the humans there are Naho's livestock, and that human is Naho's representative. Men maintain the village through labor, and the most loyal ones are given women as a reward for mating. That's how they maintain a certain number. So it's like a farm. Now look, the leader has appeared. A vile-looking old man appeared, leaning on his cane. When he gestured, the firmly closed door opened and a man went inside and came out dragging a woman. The old man, who looked satisfied as he lifted the trembling woman's chin, nodded. "Asha!" The woman's scream reached where Helmut was, making his skin tingle. The struggling woman was dragged away by the men with her mouth agape. So he's the representative. Helmut suddenly remembered what Darien had said. There's a man in that village who enjoys human flesh. He knows how to get out into the outside world. Could it be him? What are they going to do with that woman? Either eat her, mate with her, or offer her to Naho. It was a sickening statement. What could one do? It was the ecosystem of humans formed to survive in the forest of roots. He who grew up with Alaga's protection had no right to judge. That human, somehow he knows how to pick up falling humans. That guy Darien half-destroyed that village 20 years ago. It's already fully recovered. If your luck was a little worse and you fell into Naho's territory, you would have become livestock on that farm. Why did Alaga raise me? If it was bothersome to take care of me, you could have just thrown me into that village. When Helmut, who was suddenly curious, asked, Alaga was silent. In fact, she was going to eat him, but somehow she saved him, gave him food, and ended up raising him. There was no way to explain that somehow. If she were a human, he could express the emotion of not being able to swallow a young life looking up at her with big, round eyes in all sorts of languages. But she was a leopard and a monster of the forest of roots. Alaga said gruffly, I don't need to increase Naho's livestock. She raised Helmut because she didn't want to benefit Naho. It's an incredibly cumbersome task to say that she did it because she hated someone, not enough for a full explanation. But Helmut nodded. After all, that's Alaga's personality. I see. Let's go back. Chapter 10, Part 2. When Helmut and Alaga were just about to leave the territory. What is this? Helmut, who hadn't detected anything, opened his eyes wide. The heavy magic that pressed down on the air pressured his lungs, yet there was no sound. It was creepy. Alaga, who had stopped moving, placed Helmut behind her with a firm expression. Naho, oh, it's Alaga. What are you doing in my territory? SSSSSS. The sound of sweeping and moving on the ground sent shivers. The chilly aura slowly approaches. Helmut looked carefully beyond Alaga, the sight of a huge body covered in a strange ash-colored fog. The magic took shape. The yellow eyes flashed like sulfur fire. Those eyes, there were 2 pairs of them. 2 pairs of eyes were floating in the air like a nightmare. Weren't you sleeping? How can I sleep comfortably when your smell is wafting all over my territory? Isn't that right? Your body gives off a strong heat and the smell is quite noticeable even from a distance. The hissing voices overlapped. As the distance closed, the mist became fainter and finally Helmut witnessed the horrifying two snake heads. His legs were shaking involuntarily. It was a wicked and terrifying sight that would make any human faint with fear just by encountering it. The body mixed with ash and black was endlessly long. Indeed, a monster worthy of being called the ruler of the East. The two pairs of eyes discovered Helmut and narrowed. Let's see, are you planning to steal a human from my village? How dare you steal from my territory? The hissing sound sped up. Alaga bared her teeth. As the rumbling filled with magic echoed, Helmut gasped for breath. His heart was suppressed. Alaga, just like Naho, was a monster among monsters. The magical energy was so intense that it felt suffocating. Who's talking about stealing? This kid wasn't brought from your farm, was he? Then who could he be? He's a human child. Ah, I've heard about this. The human kid you've been raising, right? You raise them to increase the number and then you eat them. That's not a wise thought. It's best to eat males when they're young. How about, give me a bite from him? The two snake heads chattered alternately, flicking their tongues. It was creepy to see them trying to smell Helmut's scent in the air. Normally, Alaga, who had shown overt aggression when meeting Naho, was different now. Alaga spoke solemnly. I refuse. Any way you prefer human females, it won't suit your taste. Yeah, and just today I came to eat a human female. Urugo prepared it for me. Was that human woman the offering for today? That must be why Naho is here. Even if he moved away now, it seemed too late. But young children have soft bones and are delicious. With just the right amount of muscle, yes, it feels like eating cartilage. But this child, I smell something I don't like. Naho, smirking, forcefully pushed the two snake heads forward. The approaching heads revealed white fangs. The dripping venom sizzled as it touched the ground. Krea, a furious roar tore through the air. The shockwave shook the forest and leaves rained down as if whipped by a strong wind. It felt like something was about to burst. Helmut crouched down. It was an explosive situation where a fight could break out at any moment. Entangled in whatever the outcome, Helmut wouldn't come out unscathed. Put that disgusting head away. Are you trying to fight? Surprisingly, Alaga was exposing her fangs to Naho. Disregarding Helmut's safety as if she knew nothing about it, she emitted a formidable magical energy. Somehow it didn't seem like smoke. The two heads chatted casually as if engaged in a conversation. Ah, this smell is like that. It's Darien the human. There's no way a human can give birth alone, so he's not Darien's child. Who is this child? What's the connection with Darien? Fortunately, there was no such concept as a teacher and a disciple among monsters. Naho had no interest in human ecology. To him, humans were just worth raising as food. What connection? This kid stole clothes from Darien's house and that's why he smells like that. There's no other connection. Clothes, right, humans make and wear skins. It's a crude imitation of animal fur. How can they wear such a thing? Your humans also wear clothes, don't they? So you imitated. You should have cut your fur for him. Naho laughed, scales gleaming. Like humans, Naho didn't have anything like animal fur, but his snake skin was far from soft. Naho's scales were hard enough to easily deflect flying arrows. Without magic, even Alaga's claws wouldn't tear Naho's scales. Chapter 11, Part 1, Don't Get Angry, I'm a Pacifist. Naho, with his eyes slightly open, pulled his head back as if he had just seen something extraordinary. Just because you accidentally entered my territory for a moment doesn't mean we're going to fight outright. We've been on good terms for quite a while. The corners of the snake's mouth stretched long as if recalling a welcoming smile. Yet it was a vicious grin. Alaga also eased her momentum a bit. She knew he could attack at any moment. Without completely relaxing, she continued. Well, fine, I apologize for freely entering your territory, I admit that. Naho slithered his body away. As the distance grew, his scaly body was again hidden in the fog. Only the eerie pair of eyes shone light from within the fog. A cold voice echoed as if he had never acted kindly before. Now get your smelly body out of my territory. I hope you never set foot in my territory again. The fact that your dirty fur is falling in my territory is really unpleasant. The pair of snake eyes flashed coldly. Naho was notorious for being fierce and cruel. Monsters that rule the area usually do not monopolize their territory alone. They tolerate the ones who come and go as long as they acknowledge his rule, although they sometimes eat them. But Naho was different. If a monster mistakenly entered his territory and caught his eye, he immediately chased it and swallowed it whole. He melted both their flesh and magical cores inside his stomach. He was a greedy predator. The reason Naho let Alaga go was because Alaga was that strong. Sharp claws and fangs, swift movements, Alaga was an opponent you couldn't crush or devour in one piece. Unless Alaga starts a fight first, it's best to avoid a collision. Even monsters from other territories, while acknowledging his strength, disliked Naho. This sinister snake was a subject of aversion to everyone. Naho, who decided to back down for now against Alaga's momentum, sharpened his gaze. I can't help it, I don't have time for this. Letting Alaga, who clearly invaded his territory, go like this was humiliating. If Alaga shows a little gap, Naho would gladly swallow him with a smile. The tense air loosened. Alaga, confirming Naho's retreat, hooked Helmut with her tail. Helmut, who had fallen pale, was carried away by the tail. Reaching Darien's doorstep, Alaga let Helmut down. Thud, Helmut lay sprawled on the ground. He had no strength to crawl up to Darien's house. Alaga, sitting beside him, tapped Helmut with her tail. You weakling, is this all it took for you to collapse? If he was an ordinary boy who did not have a seed of darkness and was not trained, Helmut would have already suffocated in the power struggle between the two monsters. So Alaga's evaluation was unfair. Helmut chose to lie down and catch his breath. The sensation of impending death that penetrated deep into his heart, the overwhelming pressure of the dark magic emanating from Naho's body, and the formidable force, all had subsided. What are you doing? Alaga's tail tapped Helmut's cheek. Helmut squinted his eyes. Since Naho saw you, don't wander around alone in the future, stick to that Darien or whatever. Helmut turned around to avoid the tail. Alaga spoke in a gruff voice. He probably won't come this far, but you know, if there's a possibility, be smart. He might send someone to kidnap you, being a human marked with Darien's scent. All right, Alaga noticed Helmut's lackluster response and nudged his side with her tail. Rolling in a circle, Helmut looked up at the sky again. When facing Naho, Helmut felt fear. It was an instinctive fear. The unsettling feeling still lingered in his gut, but Helmut decided not to lose his strength. Listen carefully, Naho is persistent. He's the most cunning and foul-tempered creature in the forest. Even if he pretended to back off, deep down he'd harbor suspicions. Being under my protection and having the scent of Darien, he'll be attracted. So I should be careful. Got it? If Naho openly targets him, Helmut will not be able to resist and will just die. Helmut looked at the sky. When he faced Naho, Helmut felt fear. It was an instinctive fear. No matter how brave a person can be, it's hard to be calm in the face of death that cannot be resisted. Ironically, his entire body was trembling. It wasn't shameful to be weak. Helmut was never the strong one in the forest of roots. But what was this emotion welling up from deep within his bones? I was powerless. I just trembled behind Alaga. Chapter 11, Part 2. Helmut was overwhelmed by Naho's magic, not to mention confronting him. He couldn't bear the feeling of powerlessness. Helmut clenched his fist as if to crumble. Can I be as strong as Darien? At the sudden question, Alaga chuckled right away. There was not a hint of affection. You. Why, you don't think I can? It was a serious question. Alaga also became serious. Do you have any idea how many years it took for a human to build such strength? I can spend that much time too. Then you might die of old age before you leave the forest. Does it take that long? Is Darien that strong? Some humans can't reach that level no matter how hard they try in their lifetime. It wasn't a mere guess. It was an instinctive recognition. An ordinary human could never become like Darien. To surpass the realm of humans, something beyond effort was necessary. Helmut frowned. So you're saying I can't do it? Depends on what you do. Helmut might possess that something. First of all, the Seed of Darkness gives humans a power not originally human. The Seed of Darkness that brought Helmut to this forest of roots will give him more power as it grows. Helmut, who survived against numerous odds of death, had an extraordinary luck. If Darien could teach him, then Helmut might have some talent. In that case, maybe. Alaga held back her words. Do your best in that thing called training. Whether she hoped for him to be the only exception to escape the forest of roots or not, Helmut couldn't tell. If he leaves, it might feel a bit lonely. But the forest of roots was the territory of monsters. Even if he had the Seed of Darkness, it wasn't a suitable place for humans to root and live, considering the atmosphere and environment. Just as conifers grow in cold places and deciduous trees grow in warm places, humans are meant to live in the human world. Since I've raised him, it's better if he lives longer. He's coming back. Alaga, who casually mentioned it, got up. Are you leaving? Yeah, take care. Alaga, leaving gracefully, somehow looked relieved. Helmut, staring at her back, headed back to the cabin. Darien, who had shouldered an abundance of herbs resembling grass, had just set down his load as he arrived at a similar time. Looking at you, it seems like you've been wandering around with that leopard. Darien looked at Helmut casually. Anyway, I have to take care of this. What is this? It's poisonous herbs. Why do you have poisonous herbs? You have to consume it a little bit every day. Why do I have to consume poisonous herbs every day? Darien, who ran out of patience, tried to hit Helmut's head, who was parroting like a parrot. However, as Helmut quickly dodged, Darien's eyes narrowed. You've gotten a little better at moving. Of course, ouch. During the conversation, Helmut, who was hit, held his head. It's stupid to open your mouth when you're attacked by a stronger opponent. But now it wasn't a combat situation. Helmut closed his mouth with a rebellious look. It's for your own good. For my good. This time, he kept a considerable distance to avoid any contact. Darien frowned, looking at Helmut full of suspicion. Instead of grabbing Helmut and punishing him, he chose to keep talking. The name of this poisonous herb is Motto. Poison is naturally harmful to the body, but when consumed in the right amount, Motto increases immunity and purifies the blood. If monsters have magic, humans also have similar power. In a purified body, the power vis, which allows a swordsman to go beyond the physical limit, will settle better. Even if you don't eat the core of monsters, you can't completely stop the growth of the seed of darkness, but the toxicity of Motto is heterogeneous among magic, so it will help suppress the seed of darkness. Darien offered a small torn Motto and said, "Eat it." It was an irresistible command. Helmut suffered from stomachache all night that day. He groaned, sweating profusely from the pain of his stomach twisting. It was a night filled with suspicion that Darien was trying to kill him. But as dawn broke, the pain subsided as if it were a lie. "It's because it's your first time, you endured well." Darien, who threw an unkind word of encouragement, leaned back. He couldn't sleep last night either. "I forgot he's 10 years old. I fed him too much." If Helmut's immunity was a little weaker, or if he ate a little more Motto, Helmut would have died. That's how Helmut unknowingly passed the crisis of life and death. But he survived, so it's okay, right? Darien decided to pay more attention to his diet that day. "He grew up tougher than I thought in the Forest of Roots." Indeed, he had the qualifications to inherit his sword. It was the last stroke of luck given to him. Darien nodded his head and said, "It's the process of making a vessel to accumulate vis. Endure it, the pain will decrease as time goes by." Chapter 12, Part 1. Darien was right. Every night Helmut ate Motto and writhed in pain, but the pain gradually weakened and the time it appeared shortened. After a few days, the effects became distinctly noticeable. Upon waking up, his head felt light and clear. Acceleration in learning, a more agile body with developed muscles, these changes were evident. Helmut learned a few more basic movements from Darien: horizontal slashes, vertical cuts, and diagonal strikes. His perspective strangely altered. Should we say the trajectory of the sword became more vivid to his eyes? It was different from improved eyesight. "Has my concentration improved?" Under the influence of Motto, his mind cleared. Concentration became stronger gradually. It felt like the sword adhered to his palm. When he swung his sword until his whole body was sore, he felt a strange sense of accomplishment. A heavy voice fell on Helmut, who was looking at his faint hand. "You've come to enjoy the sword." Yes, this is what joy feels like. It's not just about getting stronger, the thrill of the moment of swinging the sword. The immersion felt when becoming one with the sword brought a pleasure as if the world was brightly opened. It was the first time something had sucked him in so swamp-like. "It's a relief." Darien was relieved. Being diligent alone is not enough. To be the best in one area, you must be able to find joy there. He was a kid with very little emotion, so Darien was worried about what to do if he couldn't enjoy the sword. "Good motivation has been created." Darien left a word and turned around. "You are in your growth period, so you need to take appropriate rest. Keep your bedtime." For several months, Helmut swung his sword countless times. One day, when he was learning basic movements and training his body to create a vessel, Darien finally said to Helmut, "Do you remember what I said about vis?" "Yes. Vis is an intangible power, much like the magic of monsters. You must have felt it all along. Even the seed of darkness embedded in your heart is essentially an intangible force, albeit with a different attribute. By accumulating vis, you can confront monsters." When he first met Darien, he felt a suppressing aura. Darien never overtly displayed his strength, but a powerful vis was condensed inside him, threatening even Alaga and Naho. Vis is a power that becomes stronger the longer you accumulate it. However, even that has not much meaning if it cannot be based on a strong body and operation method. The swordsman receives the energy of the atmosphere as vis through the sword. The calm lecture continued. "Your body is now prepared to absorb vis. What I'm going to teach you is the most effective vis training method known on the continent. Now follow my instructions. Swing the sword, breathe, and meld the energy mixed in the air into your body. That energy is vis. Your task is to freely manipulate that vis and manifest it through the sword." Darien held a wooden sword. The wooden sword in his hand looked like a heavy iron sword just by its momentum. As Darien began to move, Helmut forgot to exhale, staring at him. Even Helmut, who had just stepped into the category of swordsman, could understand it. There was no clumsiness, a smooth flow, and perfectly controlled movements. It was so close to perfection that it was impressive. The muscular giant Darien moved unbelievably lightly. However, the movement of him extending and swinging the sword felt a tremendous energy. The thing that pricks the skin and tightens the breath was similar to the magic of Alaga that he had felt before. After a while, Darien stopped moving. It felt like he completed a perfect circle, returning to the starting point. Helmut noticed that Darien deliberately performed the movements at a slower pace. Then he could have swung the sword at a speed he couldn't see, so the next thing to say would definitely be, "Now try as I did." It was by no means an easy task. He had to align not only the sword but also his breath and rhythm. However, Darien didn't show any mercy. Do it properly, if there were even a slight error, thunderous roars and fists would fly. Darien, who had inexplicably softened before, raised his whip again. Helmut gritted his teeth and concentrated. The movement shown by Darien was impressive. It was shockingly great, the desire to achieve that moved Helmut. He is truly a strong man. Darien stood far and high enough to feel distant. He understands why Alaga couldn't answer the question whether he could be as strong as Darien. But me too. He had no intention of giving up. Time was on Helmut's side. Chapter 12, Part 2. By the time a month had passed, learning while being beaten to the point of having a lump on his head, Helmut was able to perfectly follow the action shown by Darien. It was a surprisingly fast pace for Darien. He immediately threw the next task. It starts with how you hold the sword. Humans learn something called swordsmanship. This is the same as the hunting method of beasts. It is a way to wield a sword, knock down an enemy, and seize victory. Helmut was busy listening to the pouring words. Darien wasn't usually talkative, but when he started lecturing, it was like a storm of words. Darien hated explaining twice. If he confirmed whether it was understood and sensed any confusion, he would strike. He believed violence was the best way. If you understand, say it. Helmut repeated what he said verbatim. Concentration was improving day by day, not only when swinging the sword but also when listening to lectures. This didn't directly affect intelligence. However, as this accumulated, the influence of the seed of darkness increased. As cognition developed, memory and learning abilities improved. Helmut managed to avoid Darien's violently mixed scolding. Darien, noticing that Helmut properly understood the teachings, opened his mouth with a stern expression. "There's something you need to keep in mind." His tone was seriously laid out. Helmut asked casually, "What is it?" "The swordsmanship you're going to learn belongs to me, and displaying my swordsmanship means announcing that you are my disciple." "Didn't I mention before why I came to the Forest of Roots?" Helmut nodded. Darien was thrown into the Forest of Roots by his enemies. He didn't know how it happened. But Darien's strength seemed intact, so he could probably assume he fell victim to cunning tactics. "I got trapped in the Forest of Roots by those who opposed me. Whether they couldn't kill me because they still had a trace of conscience or because there was a lack of reason, I don't know. Who are they?" "That's..." Darien, who closed his eyes, briefly spoke. "I'll let you know later, after all of this is over." It sounded like it wasn't far away. At the moment when he was captivated by a strange sensation, Darien said, "Remember. By learning swordsmanship from me when you go to the human world, you may inherit all my enemies. No, it might be inevitable. Do they want to kill me because I'm your disciple? Yeah, they probably think you've come for revenge. Even if you say you won't, they won't believe it. Do you want me to seek revenge for you?" Helmut asked cheerfully. Their gazes met. Darien's deep pupils flickered intensely. It might not be easy, but if he wanted revenge, Helmut would stand in for him. He could accept that much. However, Darien cut it off without hesitation. "No, they're not to be underestimated. If you rush, there's a high chance of exposing your identity, and with the seed of darkness, you'll become a public enemy of humanity. Teaching you the sword wasn't intended for you to go out and die." Before Helmut could say more, Darien spoke firmly. "What I'm telling you is not to reveal your swordsmanship as much as possible. It doesn't mean saving your skills even when facing a strong opponent. If you encounter a strong opponent, do your best, swiftly take down the enemy. That way, naturally, you'll have fewer chances to reveal your swordsmanship." "Understood," Helmut nodded silently. "When you've sufficiently mastered my swordsmanship, I'll also teach you about common swordsmanship. With that alone, you should be able to deal with most small fry, but remember, never use a clumsy disguised swordsmanship against a strong opponent. A moment of carelessness could bring death upon you." His words instilled a sense of crisis. Darien has been implying the human world as a very dangerous and brutal world since before. It was strange. Wasn't this the Forest of Roots? And Helmut had survived even in the Forest of Roots. "Is the outside world really so full of enemies and danger?" Darien affirmed decisively. "Yes, don't think that the human world is any different from this forest. The monsters here may have a sinister appearance, automatically arousing vigilance. However, humans are different. With a weak and insignificant shell, they will deceive and manipulate you, pushing you into death before you know it." Darien genuinely believed so. The crucial point here was that Darien's last experience had been betrayal. Since then, he has been thrown into the Forest of Roots, experienced the human farms, and lived in isolation, so there was no way to wash away his distrust of humans. Helmut, who was unaware of this fact, pondered for a moment. Is returning to the supposedly dangerous human world a good choice? But now, having learned from Darien, even if it felt unjust, it seemed he couldn't stop. Helmut solemnly vowed, "In order to survive in the human world, I must become as strong as possible here." If a monster like Alaga approaches with a weak appearance like the women he saw in Naho's territory at that time, he might let his guard down. No matter who the opponent is, I must never let my guard down. A flower vine may seem beautiful, but it harbors powerful poison, doesn't it? Once again, he made a determined decision with a slightly off-kilter determination. Firmly regaining his composure, Helmut went back into training. The intensified sense of purpose had taken deep root in him, stronger than before. Chapter 13, Part 1, 4 years passed like a flash. At 14, Helmut, with his tall stature and physique, appeared to be around 16. He wasn't naturally large, but regular life and training had their effects. His lanky height and muscular body were complemented by well-fitted clothes, made roomy on purpose as he continued to grow. In the dimly lit forest of roots, his pale face contrasted with his deep black eyes, which emitted a strange light. They were deep eyes filled with a lively spirit. Cleaned up and dressed, his hidden good looks resurfaced. His neat and handsome features exuded nobility. Standing straight, he would look like a young noble if dressed properly. Seeing his growth, even the blunt Darien was filled with emotion. Clearing his throat, he commented, "You've grown quite a bit. When we first met, you were just a little kid." Speaking of which, Darien is about to remark on his age. Helmut closed his mouth. He had become more tactful. Since Darien was 96 when they first met, he must be 100 now. Despite his age, the powerful swordsman didn't look his age due to his vitality. But lately, he seemed to have lost some of his strength, as if finally starting to show his age. "Of course, because I'm older. Rather, how are you feeling today?" Helmut confidently straightened his waist. Today, in their sparring, Helmut managed to land a hit on Darien for the first time. It was a spar without using bis, and even though it was just a light touch to the abdomen out of 10 attempts, it was a significant improvement compared to not even grazing Darien's clothes before. Helmut's attacks were becoming sharper day by day. "You've become somewhat useful, but there's still a long way to go," Darien added somewhat dismissively. "Show me your vis." Helmut raised his hand, which had been hanging at his side. The tip of his wooden sword rose into the air. Holding it still, Helmut focused. A faint light shone along the tip of the sword. Vis manifestation at 14. It had been about a year since Helmut could shape his vis. It was extremely rare for a swordsman to manifest vis in their teens, and those who did almost always became renowned swordsmen across the continent. At just 14, Helmut was beyond merely talented. The Seed of Darkness is a fearsome power. Darien watched Helmut's achievement with a heavy heart. He was one of the few swordsmen who had manifested vis in their teens, but he hadn't done so within just 4 years of training. The Temple of Lumen would search for newborns born with a Seed of Darkness, killing them or moving them to the Forest of Roots, with odds of 1 in several 100,000. Darien felt as if he was seeing the reason firsthand. Just for having a Seed of Darkness, that child might grow into some kind of monster. If he grew up good, there would be no problem, but if he turned evil, an unparalleled disaster would come upon the world. The Seed of Darkness was known to be a fragment of the Demon King scattered across the world. If the Demon King were to resurrect through him, the world would have to face destruction again. Since meeting Helmut, Darien had been troubled, but I took this child as my disciple. Had Helmut shown any sign of losing control during their rigorous training, Darien would have given up if not killed him. The Seed of Darkness tends to make one's nature more ferocious. A young boy filled with vigor gaining strength would be especially susceptible, but Helmut, with his calm temperament, seemed to mitigate the influence of the Seed of Darkness well. He rarely got angry. When he did, his eyes changed, but even then he knew how to control his feelings and impulses. He wasn't cruel or impulsive, but that thing. Darien looked heavily at the tip of Helmut's sword. The manifested vis was a dull ash color. The first vis Helmut manifested was much lighter. Originally, his vis was a clear blue-white. Over time, it had darkened to gray. The implication was, the Seed of Darkness is influencing him. No matter how careful with his diet or how hard he tried not to absorb magical energy, this was the Forest of Roots. In this magic-rich forest, there was no way to completely halt the growth of the Seed of Darkness. The Seed of Darkness was slowly growing deep within Helmut's heart. Can I guarantee that this child will not be consumed by it someday? Darien could not answer that question. But what does it matter to me if this child brings about the end of the world? After all, it would be after his death. Chapter 13, Part 2. Since being betrayed and falling into the Forest of Roots, Darien was destined to end his life here. He knew there was a way out, but he had given up long ago because reclaiming everything would mean spending his remaining life fighting in the mire. Knowing the bloody path he would have to walk allowed him to give up. The regret was that I couldn't leave my swordsmanship to this world. It's human nature to want to leave a mark. By isolating himself and not taking any disciples, Darien couldn't see the signs of betrayal. Regret always comes too late, but Darien was given an opportunity. Helmut, who came to him on his own, was his only chance. Darien was thrilled by Helmut's arrival, but the child bore the seed of darkness. But what's there to hesitate about? Darien had nothing to lose. All I can hope is that he continues to control himself as he has until now. Time was running out. Humans age and die. Even with a strong body and plenty of vis, the dense magical energy of roots erodes life. Darien was no exception. I thought I had more time, but it seems it's nearly time. Darien hastened. He pushed Helmut harder, imparting all his knowledge and experience. The results were successful. Not only had Helmut nearly mastered Darien's swordsmanship, but he had also become quite human compared to when they first met. A child who grew up in the wild from birth could now mimic being human. Having taught him common sense about the human world, he would manage to adapt outside as well. The problem was leaving the forest of roots, but with the help of the leopard Alaga, the rest would be left to fate. Darien felt a sense of regret. He thought to himself, if only you had been born ordinary. He was a persistent and hardworking child, born of good status and talented. Even without the seed of darkness, if properly educated, he could have become a great swordsman shaking the continent. The seed of darkness deprived Helmut of all that. The child raised in the embrace of monsters would face a harsh fate. He'll endure. Having survived in the embrace of a monster must be his luck. But there was a concern. This child hasn't mingled with humans. Since being thrown into the forest of roots, Darien was the only human Helmut had encountered. Over 4 years, Darien and Helmut had grown quite close, but Darien deliberately kept his distance, not wanting to get too attached. Would it have been better not to? He wasn't of a savage nature. But like a beast, a person can harm another without malice or anger simply because it's necessary. Even if he remembered Darien's teachings at first, how he would change was uncertain. Lacking money, he might kill and steal. Driven by lust, he might violate women. Hungry, he might eat anyone nearby without having to worry about hunting down prey. Without any remorse. Not knowing the warmth or relationships between humans, how could he understand the value of life or morality, having only learned them in theory? He seemed to get along quite well with the monster Alaga, but that was part of the problem. Monsters and humans are different. There's one more thing I can give him. Darien made one last plan to help Helmut adapt to the human world. A few weeks later, Darien said to Helmut, "It's time." "Time for what?" "Time to leave this forest. Boy, did you think you'd stay here forever?" So suddenly, Helmut immediately took a defensive stance, expecting Darien to strike him as was often the case. But Darien, with a look of disappointment, "The words are short," said simply without throwing a punch. It was uncharacteristic. Helmut tilted his head. Darien spoke in a heavy voice, "If your seed of darkness grows anymore, you'll never be able to pass through the sacred barrier. Now is the right time. I don't feel much stronger. Is it really possible for me to leave the forest?" A natural question. It had only been a few weeks since Helmut had successfully landed a hit on Darien. Not long ago, he had charged at Alaga with a wooden sword for a spar and was soundly defeated. Darien nodded. "There's no perfect time, but there is a possible time." "What will you do? You think after receiving free teachings from me for 4 years, you'd also have me help you leave?" "No, that's not what I meant." Helmut felt slightly wronged. His arrival had likely made Darien's life easier, not harder. "I did all the menial tasks." Chapter 14, Part 1, I am not leaving, Darien asserted firmly as he continued. "The way out is simple. Beyond the southern edge of the forest of roots lies the human world. To go there, one naturally has to cross the sacred barrier. It is said that there are specific places where this sacred barrier weakens. In theory, it's possible to cross into the human world through these spots, provided one either lacks the seed of darkness or even with it can withstand the sacred barrier. There were several conditions to meet. However, Helmut realized he quite satisfied those conditions. He had the seed of darkness, but it was small in size. With Vis protecting his body, he should be able to withstand the weakened sacred barrier to some extent. Reaching there was the issue, though. "I do not know of that place. I never intended to leave, so I did not seek out the information." "Then how can I get there?" "There is someone who knows, the domain of a monster with 2 serpent heads. Irugo, the chieftain of the village in that region, knows the way. That leopard should know where it is." Irugo, a name he had heard before, so it was him. Helmut nodded in understanding. "Irugo is a mage, but not a formidable one, so he should be manageable. But do not let your guard down. He has many subordinates, so sneak into the village and look for an opportunity to overpower him. He cherishes his own life above all, so under the threat of a blade at his neck, he will confess. It's winter, so the 2-headed snake monster might be in hibernation, but if Irugo calls it out, it will appear," Darien declared. "Remember, you cannot defeat it. It is a monster with a domain. Since it cannot leave its domain, do not engage it recklessly and run away at all costs. Understand?" "Yes." 4 years ago, Helmut had seen the monstrous form of Naho with his own eyes. Recalling it made every cell in his body tense up. His dark eyes filled with determination. "Even if I end up fighting." He wouldn't just tremble helplessly like that time. Helmut steeled his resolve. And a mage, you say? He had never fought one, but he knew how mages battled. It would be his first real combat against a human, and the first opportunity to apply everything he had learned. A tension deep in his belly made his fists clench involuntarily. Darien continued with a long story afterward. It was about his past and the human world. Helmut engraved every word of Darien's into his mind. He had been preparing to leave the forest, so it was only natural to feel excited, but his mood strangely sank. Darien stared intensely at him, at the young boy just beginning to embody the demeanor of a swordsman. His gaze was as if etching something into his retina, as if looking at a precious sword he had forged with the last of his life's efforts. Darien felt a special emotion. He is not yet complete, but Helmut possessed boundless potential. Darien couldn't even imagine what kind of swordsmanship the future Helmut would display. Darien felt a fresh sense of regret that he could no longer witness Helmut's growth. It was an unavoidable fact. His mission had come to an end today. He is bound to have many enemies. The outstanding always stand out like a sore thumb. Attention brings enemies, especially for someone like Helmut with the seed of darkness, inevitably facing enemies who are difficult to handle someday. There is no black vis in humans. Only magic have blackness. Even if you go into the human world, stay away from magic to prevent your vis from darkening further. Understand? Yes, and one last thing to say. Darien's voice, heavy with emotion, broke the silence. His life's confessions seemed to pour out. Once you leave the forest, you will experience many things in the human world. To you who have lived only in the forest, the outside world will be fascinating. Perhaps it might seem like a series of enjoyable events without any difficulty. Suddenly his voice roughened. But tragedy always strikes silently. It hides in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to grab your ankles and throw you off a cliff. Being cautious doesn't mean you won't be caught, and avoiding doesn't mean you can escape. You will feel helplessness and pain. Moments more hellish than falling 1,000 miles into fire might come, but in any situation. Darien emphasized as if shouting, "Do not lose yourself, do you understand?" Helmut frowned. He couldn't quite grasp the situation Darien was describing, but he vaguely understood what he meant. The darkness lurking within Helmut, still quiet for now, but its nature is greedy and wicked. The moment he loses his reason and self, it won't miss the chance to engulf Helmut. Helmut answered carefully, "Yes, your body may be as solid as a rock, but even the strongest rock can be broken by internal fissures. It won't be easy, but humans can stand up again even if they fall, as long as they don't lose themselves." Chapter 14, Part 2. After his words, silence followed. Darien seemed about to say something more but then asked, "Is there anything else you want to ask me? Are you really going to stay here?" "Yes." His answer was firm, showing his resolve. "Nothing more to say." Darien waved his hand dismissively as if shooing away an annoyance. "I'm going to take a nap now. I have something for you. I'll have it ready, so come back tomorrow morning. I want to be alone for a while." Helmut watched Darien's retreating back as he entered the cabin. The broad and robust back, still upright, seemed smaller today. A chilling premonition brushed a corner of his heart. What is this feeling? What are you doing not going? At the sudden shout from inside the cabin, Helmut finally moved his feet. Something inexplicable held him back, but it wasn't enough reason to stay. It was Darien's wish. That day, Helmut sat by the water, staying up all night. It was a night oddly devoid of sleep. Ilaga quietly came and kept him company without a word. As dawn approached, Helmut stood up. Ilaga's voice echoed from behind, "Take care." Standing in front of the cabin, Helmut stiffened. Darien's sword and a small bundle lay in front of the wide-open door, and inside the cabin. "Darien." There was no response. Sitting upright in a formal pose with his eyes closed, Darien was silent. "Is he asleep?" As Helmut approached, he felt an odd sensation and stopped. There was no sound of breathing. An empty shell devoid of vitality, as if the body was void of life. His heart felt as if it was frozen. The weight of Darien, now stiff as a carved stone, was indescribable. Helmut reached out to pick up the sword. It felt heavy in his hand. The scabbard was battered and broken in places, but the blade shone with an astonishing sharpness when drawn. A rare masterpiece. He remembered Darien scolding him for showing interest in this sword, saying not to even dream of touching it until after his death. Suddenly tears welled up. Did I not know? No, I knew. There had been a vague premonition. The diminishing movements, the decreasing sparring sessions, the fading vitality. Helmut suddenly recalled what Ilaga had said in the past. A remarkably strong human, but in the forest of roots, even the strongest human cannot withstand the magic and gradually weakens. He didn't have the seed of darkness like you, so he wouldn't have lived long. I saw him long before you appeared, so he's probably dead by now. Perhaps the fact that Darien's life was nearing its end was not unknown. It wasn't that he didn't know what to do, he simply chose not to pay attention. Perhaps he even tried not to think about it, because Darien was strong. Somehow, it seemed like he wouldn't succumb to something as trivial as death. His limbs felt cold as if drained of blood, and his heart throbbed. Contrarily, the emotion welling up from his stomach to his throat was hot. Cold and heat mingled together in confusion. Helmut clenched his teeth. It was a new feeling. The sorrow of loss. Would it have been better to stay by his side until the end? But Darien probably didn't want to show his last moments to Helmut, dying alone like an animal away from its pack. That was the end he chose. A lonely death befitting a swordsman. Helmut closed his eyes tightly. He mulled over the words Darien had said the night before, every last one of his bequests, words that must never be forgotten, never to be heard again. When Helmut opened his eyes again, he tidied up the cabin. After gathering what he needed, he filled the room with wood and set the cabin and everything in it ablaze. Burning it was better than being devoured by beasts. Everything he left behind is now within me. Helmut watched the cabin burn fiercely for a long while. Only when the flames had died down, leaving nothing but ashes, did he pick up his belongings and begin to move. His life here had come to an end. It was time to leave, leaving this cabin and the forest of roots. Chapter 15, Part 1. His life has finally come to an end. Alaga, you knew, we talked about it not long ago. But what's with that face? Where there's a meeting, there's parting. He lived his life to the fullest and left without pain, so there's no need for mourning. Speaking like an elder, Alaga dropped something in front of Helmut. Tuck. What's this? It's what you were wrapped in when I first saw you. Helmut looked skeptically at the dirt-covered, tattered piece of cloth. I forgot where I put it and had a hard time looking for it. Take a look, maybe there's something. It seemed in poor condition, but for now it was the only clue to his origins. Helmut picked up the piece of cloth. Despite being old and dirty, it felt incredibly soft to the touch. As he fumbled with the cloth, a thin golden chain with a round object attached fell out. Thud, Alaga quickly snatched it up with her tail. Not very careful, are you? Helmut stared intently at the object dangling before his eyes, a pendant with a vine-like pattern etched onto its surface. Neither Helmut nor Alaga knew what it was for. Alaga pretended to know. Made of gold, huh? Expensive metal. You must have come from a wealthy family. Helmut nodded, remembering Darien's remarks about him being of noble birth. Is there a line on the edge? After examining it for a moment, Helmut managed to open the pendant. Click. The pendant opened like a clamshell. There's something written inside. Having learned to read from Darien, Helmut read the inscription aloud. May only light fill your path, Margaret Irene. Sounds like a woman's name. My mother's name, probably. He felt it instinctively, an item made to bless a newborn baby. It was the only clue given to Helmut. A wave of nostalgia washed over him. Helmut fiddled with the pendant before hanging it around his neck and tucking it into his chest. Once you leave, do you plan to look for your parents? I have to. I'll think about it after I get out. There's no time to dwell in sorrow nor to entertain other thoughts. As Darien said, there's no perfect timing, but now was the right moment. He must be fully alert from now on. The journey out of the forest of roots was fraught with life-threatening dangers. Naho is in hibernation, so unless there's a significant disturbance, he won't appear. During this time, others will quietly enter Naho's territory. Then the human farm's defenses will be tightened. Yes, humans are prime prey. There are quite a few who only target this period. If timed right, you can easily get Urugo in your grasp, Alaga asked as if to confirm. Are you sure you're okay? I can't have your back. If I enter the territory, Naho will notice. Don't worry, I can handle it on my own. It wasn't baseless confidence or arrogance. Helmut instinctively knew how to gauge the strength of his opponents, almost like he had become part monster. He had observed from a distance, but unlike Darien, he felt nothing towards the humans at the farm. There were no strong individuals among those who had lived comfortably within Naho's fences. As long as I don't let my guard down, I can manage. Helmut was Darien's disciple, perhaps the strongest human to have fallen into the forest of roots. Even an unripe beast doesn't fear a flock of sheep, Helmut declared firmly. I'm ready. This is where Naho's territory begins. Helmut took a deep breath and stepped forward. Entering the snake's domain didn't suddenly make the ground beneath him swampy, but he felt a sensation of being pulled downward. His heightened senses were on high alert. 4 years ago, in this territory, Helmut had tasted the deep fear of death to his bones. I'm different now from back then. Knowing how to manipulate Vis meant being able to control one's energy. With his presence minimized, even sensitive monsters would have a hard time detecting Helmut. Unless seen with the eyes, it would be hard to tell he was there. It's like hunting, the most dangerous hunt he had ever undertaken. There were no allies, silently waiting for the opportunity to strike with his claws at once. There was only one chance. If I fail, I might die. It wasn't pessimism, but a fact. His heart raced. Whether it was excitement or nervousness, a tingling sensation ran down his neck. Thanks to Alaga driving away some of the monsters from her territory, a few had entered Naho's domain before Helmut. With Naho asleep, the human farm was a tempting target. Urugo's attention would be divided. Amidst the ominous atmosphere of the forest, Helmut quietly began to move. Soon, he disappeared into the shadows of the trees without a trace. Chapter 15, Part 2. Sometimes there are humans who are more monstrous than monsters themselves. Before being banished to the Forest of Roots, Irugo was a notoriously evil mage who shocked the world. Irugo had a special trait apart from his magical talent. He was born without a sense of morality or conscience. However, this didn't become apparent until he reached a certain level of proficiency as a mage. Realizing his talent was insufficient to be the best among many mages, Irugo thought he needed to take a path others wouldn't, such as seeking forbidden or evil powers. More power, stronger magic. Mages, often driven by desire, sometimes cross lines they shouldn't. Being inherently evil, Irugo crossed those lines without hesitation. Dark magic. A special power that offers strong abilities to even the most insignificant mages quickly and easily. That was the path Irugo chose. Human emotions like pain and sorrow, which are negative, were the main feed for dark magic. Extracting pain and sorrow from humans was simple. Initially, he bought people trafficked and tortured them in his hideout for materials. This suited Irugo's inclinations surprisingly well. Torturing and killing those who screamed in pain and fear, Irugo indulged in the feeling of being an absolute being. The sadistic pleasure of trampling on victims one-sidedly, that sensation increasingly intoxicated him. The growing dark power awakened his true nature. Irugo became bolder and more cruel. He personally went down to villages to kidnap people, tortured them, and killed them painfully enough that they begged for death. The intervals between his crimes shortened, and his hideout never lacked the stench of blood. Cunning and meticulous, Irugo's spree didn't last long. Frequent disappearances and traces of dark magic. A mage who noticed Irugo's evil nature grew suspicious. The suspicion quickly pointed towards Irugo. People secretly followed him, and his horrific hideout was soon exposed to the world. People couldn't hide their disgust upon discovering blood-soaked torture chambers, laboratories filled with mutilated corpses of both genders, and jars containing human heads and severed limbs as specimens. How can someone do such things? He's out of his mind. He must be killed. The verdict for him, once captured, was either death or banishment to the Forest of Roots. As a noble and a mage, he was granted the choice, and he chose to be banished, losing his magic but avoiding immediate execution by burning at the stake. Losing everything and being cast down into the forest of RPPTS, Irugo found his new life surprisingly suitable. The abundant magic in the Forest of Roots, compatible with dark magic, restored some of his lost powers, albeit slightly. Of course, the Forest of Roots was no easy place, even with a bit of magic for protection. But as before, Irugo decided to forge a new path. If you make me your follower, I will periodically offer you human prey. Offering his human followers as sacrifices, Irugo proposed this deal to the two-headed snake, which hissed in amusement at the audacious human. An interesting human indeed. Fine, I grant you my domain. Establishing himself in Naho's territory, Irugo began to round up humans who fell into the Forest of Roots indiscriminately. Those who ended up in the Forest of Roots were either villains not as infamous as Irugo or politically exiled individuals. There were few humans capable of defending themselves in the Forest of Roots. To avoid being eaten by monsters right away, they had no choice but to follow Irugo. The human farm. In this only densely populated human area of the Forest of Roots, Irugo was both shepherd and king. This place was his castle, and the humans were his flock. As long as the sacrifices were properly made, Naho did not interfere with the human farm. There was some resistance, but Irugo easily took control of the farm. Throwing the rebels to the monsters to be torn apart and eaten alive served as a brutal example, making others tremble and submit to Irugo. The weak and deficient were ultimately nurtured in the hands of someone like Irugo at the top of the food chain, meeting an appropriate end as if they were mere livestock. Irugo's new life was satisfying. However, he occasionally faced crises. The time when someone named Darien appeared and nearly destroyed the village was a rare challenge, but this was a periodic crisis he faced. During the hibernation period of Naho, even Irugo could not afford to relax. Humans were the weak herbivores and tempting meat of the Forest of Roots. Being unable to resist, let alone escape due to their slow two-legged movement, they were easily caught and killed. During the owner's absence in this period, daily attacks occurred as if foxes were snatching chicks from a henhouse. Protecting the village from losses as much as possible had been Irugo's task until now. But this winter there were unusually many problems. Chapter 16 Part 1 Where are the women? Irugo asked nervously. Already 3 women had died. They didn't go far. They were taken in an instant near the village wall. Had they ever moved so boldly before, as if knowing Naho would not appear? Moreover, their numbers had increased. I have a bad feeling about this. It seems the demonic beasts instinctively felt Naho's hibernation was deep this time. Naho, who had only been in a shallow sleep for the past few years to stabilize the farm, warned Irugo that this hibernation would be deep. By nature, a snake requires ample hibernation. It was time to replenish since it had slept too little, being preoccupied with the human farm. There were ways to summon him, but a vicious snake throwing tantrums with magic was too much for even Irugo to handle. If called for a trivial reason, it would swallow me in anger and still remain unsatisfied. Minor problems had to be resolved by him. The women are now safe. They won't be able to breach the walls reinforced by Irugo's magic circle. Lock it up so they can't even sneak out for a while. We cannot afford to lose more women, Irugo commanded. If the numbers decrease further, I will reduce the mouths of you useless ones as well. Already breeding is a sin, as no females are born, only males. Males were more useful as labor, but Naho preferred human females. There were no women to be given to the monsters. Irugo clicked his tongue as if tallying livestock. Then a giant burst through the door, kneeling before Irugo. Thud, a hoarse voice echoed harshly. Lux has been captured, send a tracking team. Lord Irugo, entrust this to me. If he's been captured by a monster, he's already dead. Protect the village, hands. Irugo coldly turned his head. But Lux is my brother, the giant stuttered, lifting his head. Flames ignited in his bloodshot eyes. Lux was his brother. Despite being villainous brothers who committed all sorts of evil deeds, including assault, rape, and murder, enough to be driven into the Forest of Roots, their bond was strong. After becoming Irugo's subordinates, the brothers had loyally served him. But to Irugo, that meant nothing. So what do you suggest? I will go and save him. Irugo's eyes narrowed. Every human was used as he saw fit. This was an unacceptable defiance. Losing Lux was regrettable for Irugo, but removing troops to search for someone already considered dead could lead to more losses. He couldn't afford such a loss. I cannot permit it. Lux was taken. Do you intend to follow and die as well, along with the others? I'll go alone if you allow. Hands you now, anger flared on his experienced face, but Lux was the leader of the warriors. Even if he ordered others to hold him back, would they follow? He must not give any chance to disobey orders. A small spark could turn into a blaze that engulfs him. This is not good. Irugo realized he would lose two of his strongest warriors today. Such misfortune, all because of that useless Lux. It was obvious he had been caught off guard. Irugo barely managed a merciful expression, suppressing his rising anger. Yes, I'm concerned for you. Well, Lux is your brother, so if you insist, do as you wish. Though grinding his teeth internally, Irugo spoke softly and turned away. Thank you, Hans bowed deeply and then dashed out. Chapter 16, Part 2, Hans, he has not returned yet. I see, leave then. Irugo dismissed his subordinate, frowning. He had to consider Hans and Lux as dead. Knowing they would die yet still sending them, the reality now soured his mood. Nothing goes as planned. Keeping a rebellious one alive could influence the others, so it might have been for the best, but at such a time. Damn them, being brothers doesn't mean they had to die together. Now, with key forces Lux and Hans gone, protecting the village during Naho's hibernation would be difficult. There's no one immediately available to replace them. Tusk, Irugo soon left his quarters. He planned to devise ways to protect the livestock against the upcoming storm. This village was his property after all. Stealthily masking his presence with magic, Irugo reached his laboratory. Here, he recovered the magic he had lost or delved into new research. While he couldn't use humans outside as experimental subjects, did he really need to? The magic-filled Forest of Roots was a treasure trove for a dark mage. It was more practical to capture a monster for research. Dark magic is the power to make the impossible possible. In the Forest of Roots, Irugo regained some of his lost magic. With more time, he would be able to use magic at his previous level. But still, I can't escape this cursed forest. Clutching at his lifeline, continuing his current life was not smooth even for a dark mage. And today's misfortune was far from over. The laboratory, merely 5 minutes away from his quarters. Though unlikely to be attacked by someone as he's full of Naho's scent, Irugo remained vigilant. He wouldn't meet his end through carelessness like Lux. It's eerily quiet. Due to the demonic beasts, everyone refrained from going out as it got dark. Keeping a watchful eye, Irugo soon reached his destination. Standing in front of the laboratory door, accessible only to him, Irugo activated the magic circle. Click, the door's lock opened. Just as he was about to enter, a gust of wind blew from behind. A whirlwind. As he was about to dismiss it, thump, something struck him from behind. Falling into the laboratory, Irugo's eyes widened. The door closed automatically behind him. Thud, don't move. He felt a presence at his neck. The laboratory lights brightened on their own, revealing someone standing behind him. Not a demonic beast. A demonic beast couldn't hide its magic from him, a dark mage. How long has it been since I felt such a threat? For the first time in a while, Irugo felt a chill. The seasoned dark mage opened his mouth as calmly as possible. Who are you? What do you want? I heard you know a way out of the Forest of Roots. Tell me. Who would be looking for that now? Irugo glanced at the small shadow reflected on the floor, his eyes shifting slightly back. The face, as pale as moonlight against his dark eyes, had fine features that could be mistaken for a girl's, expressionless. A boy he had never seen before. Yet Irugo thought he knew who it was. Insolent brat. Barely 13 and already so bold. The dull blue eyes that caught sight of Helmut sparkled cunningly. Calculations raced through his mind. If I coax him well, he'll show his weakness. The moment the opponent let his guard down, Irugo would demonstrate why he was a dark mage. Helmut responded indifferently. Does it matter to an enemy? Answer me. I've heard Darien was raising a disciple. That must be you. Just tell me how to leave the forest. You know, don't you? Why should I tell you? Swoosh. A blade gleamed blue, pressing instantly against his neck. Because you'll die if you don't. If I die, Naho will wake from his slumber and appear, and then you'll die too. You don't think you, as a human, can stand against Naho, the ruler of this territory, do you? Can Naho revive the dead? Don't worry about me, you're definitely dying. Stop your tricks. Irugo closely observed the opponent's expression. The voice, forcefully spat out, showed no flinch at threatening someone's life. There was no sign of nervousness or trembling. A calm coldness that seemed to rule out any negotiation or trade. A tough nut to crack. A human living in the forest of roots, yet not one of his livestock. This human was threatening him. Where did Darien find such a creature? An absurd risk factor. Yet Irugo had controlled every danger in the forest of roots. Hadn't he even managed to persuade Naho? I'm the only one in this forest who knows that. If you kill me, you'll never find a way out. Mages like to keep records, they said. I could search your place, but I'd rather simplify the process. Unable to linger in Naho's territory, Helmut was determined to extract the answer from Irugo. At all costs, Helmut's gaze sharpened. I could spare your life, but would Naho still keep you as a subordinate if you couldn't use magic? Even with a once-broken body, Irugo could use magic in the mana-filled forest of roots. But if made unable to speak or if his tongue were removed, a mage couldn't cast spells. Not even the forest of roots could change that. Irugo's expression changed. A young kid, but not easy. Fine. Chapter 17, Part 1. I was lucky, Helmut thought. The attacks by the demonic beasts were more frequent than anticipated. Although the village's defenses had become stringent, Helmut's infiltration went smoothly, not being a demonic beast himself. Surrounded by active magical energy, Helmut concealed his presence, constantly watching the area where Irugo was. He waited for the moment Irugo would move alone. It didn't take long for Irugo to act as Helmut had anticipated. The moment Irugo left his magically protected abode to enter the laboratory, loosening his guard for just an instant was enough. I didn't expect an opportunity to come this quickly. But it wasn't over yet. Not until he obtained what he aimed for and escaped Naho's domain. With a sword pointed at his back, Irugo slowly moved deeper into the laboratory. Helmut sharply observed the bent back of the old man rummaging through the archives. If necessary, I'll cut him down. The word murder held no resistance in thought for Helmut. He had already slain demonic beasts. Helmut hardly felt the difference between demonic beasts and humans. Was it just a matter of whether their flesh could be eaten? That subtle discomfort. Would he feel something when cutting down a human? While searching the archives, Irugo finally spoke. What is your name? Irugo was known to be cunning and adept. Helmut had no intention of falling for trivial talk. It doesn't matter. Fine, but let me give you one piece of advice. The way out is just a theory that has never been tested and requires risking your life. It would be a waste to throw away your young life on such a futile act. Not there yet. Without showing any intention of listening, Helmut pressed the sword closer and Irugo calmly continued speaking. No one has ever attempted it. Of course, there were few who had the capability to try. Darien might have been able to leave, but he didn't. If you're here, what happened to Darien? Did you decide to leave together? For the first time, Helmut's eyes showed disturbance and Irugo smirked. I see Darien is dead. It was a moment of realization, Darien's disciple. He seemed capable but was still young. It would have been better if Darien had joined him in the infiltration. If it were him, Irugo would have given up without resistance. Naho would be difficult to deal with while alert, but now, during his dormant phase, even Darien could infiltrate this far. To send his dearly raised disciple into danger alone seemed too harsh of a task. Darien, the only human Irugo could not control in the forest of roots. I've been waiting until the time comes. This was Naho's domain, the very heart. If Naho noticed his infiltration, it was unpredictable how he would react. Naho was an opponent not even Darien could confidently defeat. In that process, records could be destroyed. For Darien, whose life was dwindling, battling Naho was a risk too great. He needed time to teach his disciple. For him, who couldn't move recklessly, he had no choice but to leave the task of extracting the record to his disciples. Until then, he didn't show any interest in the record. Yes, it's time for him to die. Unless he lives by the power of darkness like me, even the world's greatest swordsman can do nothing. Irugo sneered inwardly. The biggest threat was completely eliminated. With a triumphant smile, Irugo extended his hand. Come now, no need to be so guarded. I have a proposal for you. In Irugo's hand was suddenly a thin booklet. Helmut's gaze shifted towards it. As he reached out, Irugo blocked him with his other hand. How about becoming my successor and living in this village? Nonsense. Helmut frowned, clearly unimpressed. Irugo spread his arms wide. With your skills, having received Darien's swordsmanship, you're more than qualified. The others here are all too weak, useless. I've grown old, so I'll leave this place to you. All the women here will be yours, not just the women, but everything. I'll persuade Lord Naho, think about it. However, Helmut flatly rejected. His sword tip drew a line of blood on Irugo's neck. I need nothing from you, a smirk appeared on Irugo's face. So you're willing to risk your life on a meaningless hope. I will live and leave the forest. It was a voice full of certainty. If Darien thought Helmut would die in the forest, he wouldn't have passed down his sword. There are things one must do, even without any guarantees, and not so easily swayed by cunning whispers. Hand it over. Helmut's cold gaze drew a line on Irugo. Any further tricks and he would cut him down. Irugo sensed this sharp line. Fine, fine, if that's how you want it, I can't help it. Helmut grabbed the booklet Irugo was offering. Watching Irugo's movements, he unfolded it to see a delicately drawn map and writings inside. Chapter 17, Part 2. Listen, this record was found by chance in a mage's hideout while I was exploring the forest before settling here. The mage had hoped other mages would find his hideout and left marks. But when I found it, he had already become a skeleton. He must have desperately wanted to escape this place. He was a mage proficient in hiding magic, living in the forest of roots hidden from demonic beasts, researching a way out. Sadly, he died before he could put his research into practice. Is this the place? Helmut pointed at an area marked with an X, alongside a red circle and wave symbols. The great waterfall at the end of the forest of roots. If you throw yourself into the waterfall, you can pass through the barrier following the water flow. Like how water isn't contaminated by magical energy, it also excludes the purifying power of the barrier. In the water, the barrier's power weakens, although strong enough to shatter your body carrying the seed of darkness. Helmut became newly aware of the vis inside him, enhancing his body. To withstand the barrier, struggling to breathe in the fierce water currents, it certainly won't be easy. In the past, I told Darien about this record, hoping he would either leave the forest of roots or die trying. Either outcome was no loss to me. Yet among those who knew of this record, Darien, with the highest chance of success, gave up on leaving. Now his disciples stood before Irugo. Surely he will fail. Irugo smiled kindly. This is all I know. All right, since you've passed on the method, I'll spare you. Helmut spoke readily. He considered Irugo expendable but had learned to honor promises, and Darien did not wish for Irugo's death. In their last conversation, he said, if it's not unavoidable, let Irugo live. Why, he's a wicked sorcerer. Those with power bear responsibilities. Helmut learned about the duties he must uphold. That life should not be taken lightly. But Irugo was an evil to be eradicated, not someone to be harmed without reason. That's why, though a wicked sorcerer, there are people who survived because of him. A life like livestock, but even such a life is a luxury in the forest of roots. If you're not planning to take responsibility for those people, leave Irugo alive. He's a necessary evil, that's why I've left him be. What does it matter what happens to those people? In the forest of roots, if you can't protect yourself, you die. It's natural for the weak to perish. Darien's gaze hardened. Do not take the weight of life lightly. Weren't you also saved by the mercy of that leopard? He was right. Helmut silently agreed, his mouth shut. Annoying gaze and the meddling bothers me. But a promise is a promise. If he killed him, Naho might appear. There were ways to kill slowly, but Helmut decided to leave Irugo unharmed. He knocked Irugo down to the ground. Ouch. What are you doing? Irugo's clear voice echoed. Helmut tied Irugo's hands and securely bound him to a pillar. He knew that merely tying up a mage wasn't enough. Raising the vis, Helmut pressed his fingers into several points on Irugo's body, blocking the flow of magical energy. For a few hours, until the vis scattered and blocked the flow of magic, Irugo couldn't cast spells. To summon the dormant Naho, magic was necessary. Bound and with his magic sealed, Irugo was just an ordinary old man for those hours. It'll loosen over time, live right from now on. Helmut left these words as advice to Irugo's incredulous face and turned away. Frustrated, Irugo shouted desperately. Do you think you can survive and escape the forest of roots? He wasn't afraid of taking risks. If Irugo believed it was possible, he would have attempted it first, but he was convinced of its near impossibility. Without constructing magical energy strong enough to withstand the barrier, as a dark sorcerer, it was nearly impossible. Even the strongest demonic beast in the forest of roots couldn't breach that barrier. Moreover, can you even make it alive to jump into that waterfall? There was something he hadn't said, something to be discovered at the very end. The eyes of the dark mage flashed with malicious intent. However, the boy with the calm eyes glanced at him and turned his back. Step by step, without hesitation, he left Irugo's laboratory, as if Irugo was nothing more than a small stone tripping his steps. Chapter 18, Part 1. What the? Irugo's face contorted momentarily as he glared at the departing figure. Since his true nature was revealed, there had been hardly anyone who treated the dark mage Irugo in such a manner. Fear, disgust, hatred. He had been the target of all sorts of extreme emotions and had relished in the attention and influence he commanded through people's gazes. To be ignored like this, it's been a while since I've felt this emotion, like master, like disciple. The last time he saw Darien, he had shown the same demeanor. A boiling heat surged from within. Irugo recognized the emotion consuming him. Inferiority. How dare this young brat? The gaze was unwavering. Unlike the lifeless bodies strewn throughout the village, this boy radiated vitality and confidence, a composed coolness not tainted by arrogance. This boy would become a great swordsman, continuing Darien's legacy. The seed of darkness within him was but a tiny shadow against the light he possessed. Irugo realized it wasn't the boy he coveted, but his essence, something Irugo could never possess. The wicked mage suddenly remembered. The boy trained by the greatest swordsman in the Forest of Roots, standing in the brilliant sun outside. The promising youth destined for a world beyond Irugo's reach, a future unfolding outside the forest. Arg, it was unbearably twisting inside. You think you can do it? He couldn't let it go. A malevolent darkness swallowed him. He knew it wouldn't come to fruition. He would die failing. But Irugo wanted to completely shatter that possibility, however slim it might be, like the last vestiges of goodness in the Forest of Roots. He was willing to risk anything for it. Irugo laughed maniacally. He had been banished to the Forest of Roots for his madness. What's one more mad act in my life? Anger and jealousy, heightened emotions, forced the sealed magic from his body. Veins bulged and his face contorted with strain. Despite the painful groans, he finally summoned him. Deep beneath the ground, his master, who had long fallen into a deep slumber, was awakened. Lord Naho. Awakened, the ruler of this realm, the two-headed snake, was forcibly roused from sleep. The snake's irritable mood transmitted through terrifying magical energy. A grating shout echoed. Irugo, what reason have you for waking me? If it's for something trivial, I'll crush you whole. Rejoice, Darien is dead and his disciple is here. Naho let out a sharp laugh. The high-pitched tone indicated his excitement. The giant snake began to move, rumbling through the ground. Go now? Irugo grinned, distorting his face as the twisted magic coursed through him, feeling the power leak away like sand through a broken vessel. Worse off than when he first fell into the Forest of Roots. But it didn't matter. Nothing in this world is free. Did you think you could easily take something from me? Irugo coughed up blood, chuckling maniacally. The price for taking the records would be his life. Helmut was running. As he left Irugo's laboratory, his legs moved faster, nearly skimming the ground. A sinister premonition enveloped him like dark clouds. Kaya, screams echoed as demonic beasts madly dashed, flying over his head. They weren't attacking him, they were terrified. Beasts that boldly hunted humans in Naho's domain were now fleeing without regard. It meant one thing: Naho had awakened from his slumber. Perhaps I should have killed him. Helmut's gaze turned cold. He should have ignored Darien's words, but it was too late for regrets. Escaping was now the priority. No matter how fast he moved, freshly awakened from slumber, Naho would be sluggish. His only option was to run. How long had he run? The beasts ahead had vanished without a trace, leaving silence. For the first time, he envied their swift escape. The forest, silent except for the rustling wind, had forgotten even the chirping of insects. An unnatural phenomenon, a quiet born of fear. Instinct sharpened his senses, his skin tingled with tension. Death was near, magic thickened around him like an abyss. The source was indiscernible. Thudding vibrations approached from afar, quickly intensifying. Gray mist rolled in, suffocatingly dense. Helmut stopped. The edge of the domain was far behind. This is it then. He hadn't escaped Naho's domain. A chill settled over his heated body, biting cold. A low, eerie sound whispered as something approached through the mist. Two pairs of glowing eyes floated up like ghosts, revealing a two-headed snake, its presence ominous. Hello, little one. It's been a while, hasn't it? Chapter 18, Part 2. You've grown a lot. Humans grow up so fast. Despite the gentle tone, the sight was monstrous enough to petrify. Did you think you could easily escape my domain? I've been eagerly awaiting a guest like you. I can't let you go that easily. Then I'll just have to kill you and leave. Helmut spoke confidently, a bluff, but his resolve hardened. He wasn't the trembling child of the old days but a trained swordsman, yet to Naho he still seemed inconsequential. The snake laughed with a throat full of malice. Brave but foolish human, what can your tiny body do? Your flesh looks tender. A unique flavor, no doubt. It's a pity about Darien, but don't worry, you'll soon follow him. Come into my belly, child. The snake's jaws opened wide. With the speed of a falling rock, it lunged. Cure! A colossal impact shook the forest as dust obscured vision. Helmut rolled to the side, quickly standing up. Where's Naho? He strained to see through the dust. His ears rang and debris stung his body. Where is he? A metallic sheen blocked his path. Realizing he was encircled by a moving, ashy black wall, he felt a chill. As vision returned, he found himself trapped, the walls closing in. He was in the heart of Naho's coil. Bright eyes gazed down like the sun, dripping venom. Where will you run? Try to struggle, no escape. To leap would mean entering Naho's mouth, trapped like a rat in poison. I can't stay passive. Snakes constrict their prey. Though Helmut was too small to be squeezed by Naho, being flattened was inevitable. Nowhere to run, Helmut watched Naho's satisfied gaze from high above, the face of a snake certain of victory. A racing pulse sharpened his focus. It won't go your way. Underestimation, an opponent who underestimates you will inevitably expose a weakness. That opening would provide a chance for a counterattack. Naho, seeing Helmut as nothing more than the trembling child he once was unaware of the changes that had occurred within Helmut since then. He didn't know what it meant to be a swordsman who could shape Vis into a weapon. Now Helmut moved like a flash of lightning. To the absolute ruler of this domain, Naho, he was a streak of light cutting through the dark. Naho, unflustered, opened both mouths wide. No matter where the prey jumped, it would end up crawling into his throat by its own volition. But Helmut was too fast. This wasn't the movement Naho expected from a human. If a head has two sides, there is a gap between them. Helmut squeezed through that gap, pushing off at the right moment to leap upwards. No, at the moment the two heads turned to face each other, Helmut was between their eyes. Powerful magic fortified Naho's flesh. Yet every creature's weakness is the same, the eyes. Suddenly Helmut wielded his sword. Vis erupted from his core, propelling the strike. He swung the sword horizontally with all his might. Crack, it felt like cutting through stone. His grip ached. There was no time to assess the situation as Helmut plummeted towards the ground. I cut it right. The sensation in his hand was unmistakable. Ag, one head screamed sharply, thrashing wildly. The commotion was so intense that the other head struggled to maintain balance, swaying side to side. Stop it, the brat is getting away. It hurts, I can't see. Thunk. Helmut landed on the ground, having evaded Naho. Delayed pain surged again. Dust mixed with blood streamed from his wounds. Helmut's mind was astonishingly clear. Fully focused, it was as if he had ingested a stimulant. Chapter 19, Part 1. Helmut did not overestimate himself. He had seized the opportunity created by Naho, but now that opportunity was spent. After all, his sword could not cut through Naho's sturdy body. Even the strike a moment ago had consumed a considerable amount of vis. The sword given by Darien was not blunt, however it required a massive amount of vis to penetrate Naho's magic. I'll make my escape now. Helmut moved his legs, but soon a terrible event unfolded. Damn it, stupid head, crunch. Following the terrifying noise, there was a sound of thick and chewy flesh being bitten. Helmut, who was running, suddenly looked back. One head was swallowing another that had lost its eyes. It was a sight so grotesque it sent shivers down the spine. Naho's remaining head, having attacked the other side left defenseless, swallowed its longtime sibling down its throat. Naho's body swelled up as much as the head's volume before settling down. From the severed section, dark red blood and magic surged. The wound was healing quickly. Now that the useless part is gone, Naho's eyes turned towards Helmut. The gaze was blazing with venom and fury. Naho had become a snake with just one head, a unified flesh with no division. I'll melt you in my belly along with my head. The enraged snake launched its body as if exploding. It was as fast as if it had thousands of legs, closing the distance Helmut had created in an instant. Helmut reached for his sword. If he could perfectly turn around, he would counterattack. However, just as he was about to dodge, he was struck head-on by the accelerating head. Bang! The tremendous impact felt like colliding with a rock, paralyzing his mind. Helmut was flung through the air like a piece of paper. This place. He regained consciousness on top of a tree lush with leaves, fortunately not having lost his sword. Blood poured out of his mouth. Helmut checked his condition. Pain surged throughout his body without a specific location. Did I break a rib? It seemed like several bones were out of place. His insides were a mess. Helmut spat out all the blood in his mouth. His head was ringing. It was only thanks to the vis he instinctively summoned to protect his body that he didn't die. Where's Naho? If Naho had followed up immediately, he would have been dead without question. He felt the magic. The beast was nearby. Helmut only moved his head to locate it. He found Naho's shadow cast towards him immediately. They were only about 50 paces apart. A massive snake was visible through the leaves, its head raised high, emitting a sinister magic and surveying its surroundings. The area around it was already devastated. Helmut's figure was narrowly hidden by the branches above him. If it had been the original Naho, it would have found him immediately, but it seemed to be impaired with only one head left. The beast was swaying, shaking its head from side to side. His senses must be confused. Having lived with two heads, it would need time to adjust to just one. I need to escape from here. Helmut mustered strength into his throbbing body. The vis, which had nearly depleted, was slowly replenishing. The magic-filled atmosphere of the forest aided his recovery. His body, which seemed unable to move at all, creaked into action. But then, Roar, you rat-like creature, where are you hiding? A wave of magic roared like a strong wind. The aftermath shook the tree Helmut was in, threatening to topple it. Helmut lost his balance and fell downwards. Thud, his teeth clashed hard against each other, sparks flew before his eyes. The pain was breathtaking. It was a small groan, but it was enough. The tall head moved immediately. The sinister snake laughed sharply. There you are, grrrrrrr. The snake moved along with the vibration. It slithered towards him with a speed that surged like a wave. Absolute death was approaching like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. There was no way to counter it. I can't die like this. A desperate spirit lifted his body. Helmut's eyes filled with determination. Boom, Helmut's eyes widened. Accompanied by a heavy sound, something massive fell, blocking his view. Helmut miraculously saw a white leopard that appeared. Its white fur gleamed with magic. Alaga, you've done well, leave the rest to me. A growling voice mixed with heavy breathing was heard. Realizing the turn of events, she ran, crossing the boundary of her territory. Upon finding Helmut lying down and smelling blood, she knew it was too late. But it wasn't completely too late. Alaga glanced back. You go, I'll stay too. Before Helmut could say he would fight, Alaga yelled, hurry. Naho's eyes flashed. Alaga's approach had gone unnoticed, and a murderous intent exploded from the beast's entire body. In an imperfect state, normally Naho would have avoided a fight, but the pain he endured had blown away his reason. A snake venomous for having its prey snatched away. Chapter 19 Part 2 Helmut hesitated, but Alaga's back was as solid as a cliff. Before facing death like Darien, no other words were allowed. I'd only be a burden as I am. He had always been taught to think rationally. Helmut clenched his teeth. Thank you for everything. Would there be a day when they meet again? If the farewell with Darien was eternal, perhaps this too might be. It was impossible to be indifferent to a predetermined farewell. Alaga had been a companion for a long time. A warm current spread in his chest. Helmut turned his back. He forced his glued feet to start moving. Only if he disappeared could Alaga fight with ease. This stinking white cat, daring to enter my territory, your ugly head has become somewhat tolerable with just one left. You've always been an annoyance. Today we end this. Do you think you can manage with one head when you couldn't with two? Let's see you try. Soon the two rulers of their domains clashed. The magic of the two spread beyond the space, permeating their territories. The fierce roar and the loud noise vibrated the air, destroying the surroundings. The forest of roots, which had seemed peaceful until now, was engulfed in a noisy battle. Helmut was moving away from that place. With Vis nearly depleted and his body in ruins. However, no monster would dare attack Helmut, marked by the sense of both Naho and Alaga. Helmut smoothly entered Alaga's territory. The ongoing battle between the two monsters caused a heavy vibration in the air. The aftermath of the battle instinctively stimulated fear in the monsters, keeping them at bay. Helmut sat on a rock, catching his breath. His body, battered enough to barely walk, now managed it with no difficulty. An unbelievable recovery. Helmut knew that, despite having Vis, a human couldn't possess such regenerative abilities. The Seed of Darkness. At the moment Vis had nearly depleted to protect his body from the fall from the tree, Helmut felt something like a burning ember deep within him. It was slowly growing, its size indeterminate. More chilling than hot, it was a creepy power that seemed to freeze the blood. With Vis gone, it was natural for the Seed of Darkness to become unbound. The power that reached out in the absence of Vis seemed to mend the broken vessel. It devoured the surrounding magic, regenerating damaged muscles and flesh. It felt like being forced to use a potent, harmful drug the more it was used. If left unchecked, it would not only heal the body but also seek to dominate Helmut. First, I need to recover Vis. Helmut grasped his sword, surrendering to the flow of power. The power of the sword Vis, it was a gift from Darien. Hours later, he sheathed his sword at his waist. The replenished Vis pressed down on the Seed of Darkness, filling him. A power he had grown accustomed to, now missing, felt incomplete. Helmut clenched his fist and assessed his body condition. There's no hindrance to movement. Not in perfect condition, but he felt about 80% recovered. It should improve as he went on. The important juncture has passed, so it should be fine. There was no time to delay. Although he had succeeded in suppressing the Seed of Darkness, having absorbed a bit of magic, it had grown larger than before. Helmut felt a bit rushed. Now the sacred barrier is the issue. Helmut reached into his pocket and pulled out a book. Though worn, it fortunately wasn't too damaged to read. Recalling Irugo's words, he looked at the map. He hadn't been there but had a rough idea of the location. Only passing through the barrier remains. Beyond the barrier was the outside. Hadn't he been working hard for a long time for this? His heart already fluttered in anticipation. Outside the forest of roots, the human world, what kind of place was it? Would his mother remember him? He couldn't imagine any of it. Packing his belongings, Helmut glanced back towards Naho's territory. Alaga felt like a powerful being, strangely reassuring, but he couldn't help feeling anxious. Ilaga should be able to defeat Naho. Naho, having lost a head, couldn't be unharmed, and even in a sound state, Naho wouldn't dare challenge Ilaga. Ilaga would win, but that natural flow seemed yet unrealized. The battle is dragging on. If Naho desperately struggled, it wouldn't be easy for Ilaga. Nevertheless, it was Helmut who had made Naho like this. No matter how strong the opponent, if a weakness is shown, it can be cut. If one remains focused, a counterattack is certainly possible. Helmut reminded himself of this fact. If Ilaga swallows Naho's core, his power will also massively increase. There was a positive aspect. Thinking this way lightened his heavy heart. In the Forest of Roots, where the strong rule, Naho's core would be a great gift to Ilaga. Of course, such power might be useless to a lazy leopard like Ilaga. Goodbye, muttering a farewell he had learned somewhere, Helmut packed his belongings and left Ilaga's territory. Now only the last task remained. Chapter 20, Part 1. As Helmut moved further away from Ilaga's territory, the journey became increasingly arduous. Though it was an anticipated situation, the relentless attacks from magical beasts made it impossible to rest comfortably at any moment. Unable to sleep well and always on edge even when quenching his thirst at a water source, Helmut came to truly understand what it meant to be human in the Forest of Roots. He realized how fortunate he had been to survive up until now, but I didn't know it would be so exhausting to the point of feeling drained like this. Within Ilaga's territory, no magical beast dared to attack Helmut except when he was the aggressor. But outside Ilaga's domain, Helmut was merely a human. Humans seemed small and frail, easy prey to be swallowed in one bite. In the Forest of Roots, humans were nothing more than food. They might carry the scent of powerful magical beasts, but it wasn't a familiar scent. Driven by hunger, they revealed their fangs and attacked Helmut from time to time, regardless of their strength. Nevertheless, Helmut managed to secure food supplies smoothly. Unless it's someone of Naho's caliber, I can handle them without a problem. Gaining practical experience, Helmut muttered while tearing into the meat. He could protect his body with magical energy, but none of the magical beasts that attacked him knew how to properly defend themselves. They only knew how to attack with enhanced teeth or claws. Helmut realized that not many magical beasts knew how to manipulate magical energy. Only mature magical beasts could manipulate their energy to enhance their body parts or move swiftly. They used their abundant magical energy in simple, childlike ways. The vis Helmut possessed was not considerably powerful compared to the magical energy of the beasts he faced. However, by concentrating his vis on his sword, he effortlessly sliced through their bodies, which were merely clusters of magical energy. Helmut managed to dispatch them efficiently, using his power in an exceedingly effective manner. Is this the power of humans? Compared to magical beasts, humans had frail bodies and significantly lesser strength. Yet, by manipulating vis, humans could overcome their physical limitations. Helmut had learned to efficiently wield his vis from the very beginning. If other humans were also capable of this, the outside world would be intriguing. Thinking of his adversaries, Helmut grinned, revealing his teeth. I'm looking forward to it. He wanted to become stronger to leave the Forest of Roots, but that alone wouldn't satisfy him. He desired to become even more powerful, so powerful that he wouldn't need to fear anyone, just like Ilaga, who dominated the Forest of Roots. So that even if it became known that he harbored the seed of darkness, the temple wouldn't dare to do anything about it. It's time to go. Helmut stood up, feeling somewhat revitalized after eating his fill. As he approached the edge of the Forest of Roots, closer to the sacred barrier, the number of magical beasts decreased. The magical energy in the air naturally combusted upon contact with the sacred barrier, creating an environment unfriendly to magical beasts. It was better to hurry on the road to conserve energy. Magical beasts were slowly gathering. To rest his weary body, he needed to reach the vicinity of the barrier quickly. He knew the direction, though he wasn't sure how long it would take. Not much further, encouraging himself, Helmut quickened his pace, moving as swiftly as if he were running. Helmut's forced march ended on the fourth day just before he collapsed from exhaustion. After a fierce struggle with a rather strong magical beast, Helmut fell to the ground, sleeping as if dead soon after. When he awoke, he was relieved to find himself alive. Had another magical beast appeared, he would have been killed without a chance. Only then did Helmut realize he had made it close to the barrier. Magical beasts don't live around here, do they? Helmut closed his eyes and sensed the atmosphere. The fight between Ilaga and Naho had either concluded, or he had entered a region where he could no longer feel it. Having slept deeply, albeit unintentionally, his condition had significantly improved. With this, I can jump into the barrier in almost perfect condition. Helmut resumed his journey, walking carefully, not too fast. The magical energy that felt blurry began to thin out as he neared the barrier. The air devoid of magical energy felt strange yet refreshing to Helmut, like the disappearance of pungent smoke. Not bad. Alaga would probably dislike it. Since magical energy and energy coexist, it wasn't an ideal place for practicing this. Especially since Helmut harbored the seed of darkness. Initially unnoticed, a peculiar discomfort began to emerge as if something was obstructing him. Had he not wrapped the seed of darkness in vis, the irritation would have been more than just bothersome. The sacred barrier is already rejecting the seed of darkness. Crossing the barrier would envelop him in tremendous agony. He needed to be fully alert. Is that why Darien was so harsh with me? To cultivate my endurance. As he pondered various thoughts, Helmut, while bracing himself, heard a familiar sound. Chapter 20, Part 2, Water, not the gentle babble of a stream, but the powerful flow of water. Drawn to the sound, Helmut followed it, and the noise grew louder until a vast gorge came into view. A massive flow of water running down a slope, as if all the water in the forest of roots converged here. And at the end of the rapids, he saw a cloudy sky. The sky was obscured by something opaque, and there was a cliff. The water fell from the cliff below. A waterfall, Helmut exclaimed, feeling a surge of joy. How long had he waited for this moment? The hardships he endured on his way here flashed through his mind. Helmut observed the water from a distance. Though magical beasts likely didn't inhabit this area close to the barrier, it was better to be cautious. Suddenly, the surroundings darkened. Had night fallen abruptly? No, a pitch-black shadow had engulfed him entirely. Helmut urgently looked up. The sky was darkened, resembling a moon covering the sun, a gigantic bird. As it descended, its wingbeats created strong winds that stirred the water's surface. The magnificent bird landed with graceful, light movements that seemed to defy gravity, its feathers dazzling in rainbow colors. Though it was the most beautiful magical beast he had ever seen, appearance and benevolence did not correlate. A terrifying magical energy emanated from the creature as it folded its wings. Clearly, this was no ordinary magical beast. A human child in my territory, what brings you here? The voice sounded kind, but Helmut remained wary. Naho too had been kind in speech. Most magical beasts viewed humans as nothing more than prey. It was remarkable that Alaga did not consume human flesh. So a magical beast is near the sacred barrier. I should have suspected the dark mage's easy cooperation. If this close to the barrier, the purifying aura should be eroding the magical energy. Any magical beast would find this feeling repulsively unpleasant, yet it appeared regardless. Either it had a perverse taste or it was strong enough to withstand the barrier. The bird looked at Helmut with interest, tilting its head. My name is Agrel, what's yours? Helmut, renowned Agrel. One challenge after another. It didn't seem hostile for now, but after surpassing Naho, he now faced the ruler of the southern domain. Helmut glanced towards the gorge, estimating his chances. Even if he managed to jump in, surviving Agrel's attack would be difficult. Crossing the barrier in such a state would be akin to suicide. Were Agrel and Alaga on good terms or bad? Even if the former, there was little hope. If the latter, it was the worst-case scenario. I sense a familiar scent on you, faint amid the blood but unmistakable. Ah, the strong scent of Naho, and even fainter as if ingrained over a long time. Is that Alaga? Intriguing. Naho and Alaga are bitter enemies, yet here stands a human bearing the sense of both. Agrel's eyes sparkled. Tell me, child, are you a follower of Alaga or of Naho? The bird's whisper was enchantingly clear. I am a follower of Alaga. Helmut decided to be honest. After all, Alaga likely had a better reputation than Naho, otherwise it would be problematic. Is that so? Then a follower of Alaga has trespassed into my territory. Agrel's gaze sharpened, and a tremendous magical energy, along with an oppressive aura, descended upon Helmut like a mountain. It was a threat only a being holding the power of life and death could make. Alaga did not send me. There was a reason. A reason? Do you think you have a reason that justifies sparing your life? Speak. The tone was as if prompting Helmut to prepare his last words, daring him to try and talk his way out of this. Helmut desperately racked his brain. What had Alaga said about Agrel? Helmut tried to remember. During his childhood, when Helmut could hardly sleep, Alaga would tell him about the rulers of the various domains within the Forest of Roots. In the south resides a creature named Agrel, a bird with dazzling feathers. You'll know it when you see it. That creature has an insatiable curiosity. Having lived so long, it will do anything to satisfy that curiosity. If anyone would dare to cross the barrier just to see what's on the other side, it would be Agrel. Curiosity, then. Helmut had one thing that could potentially pique Agrel's curiosity. Chapter 21, Part 1. If you're asking for a reason, could it be that what I'm about to do might hold some significance for you? Significance, Helmut responded firmly, because I will become the first being to cross this barrier and leave the Forest of Roots. Agrel's habitat wasn't here. Its lingering near this area was likely due to curiosity about the barrier. However, it seemed not insane enough to throw itself into the barrier, as Alaga had suggested. Would it not be interested in seeing someone else take the plunge instead? Agrel's wings fluttered and a sharp, mocking voice pierced the air. Do you think that's possible, you weak human child? I can see the core of magical energy within you. You're no different from a magical beast. You'll die without even passing through the barrier. Then let's test it. I'll be the only human who has come this far to cross the sacred barrier, a being equipped with both ability and will. Helmut had shaped himself for this very purpose. Igrel countered, "Leave human prey to burn at the barrier, what a waste. There are many humans in the forest of roots, but I'm the only one who can cross the barrier." Igrel seemed to ponder for a moment, tilting its head. Helmut waited for an answer amidst the tension. Magical beasts are fickle, but Igrel wouldn't change its mind or launch a surprise attack on Helmut. There's no need for the strong to do so to the weak. Igrel finally spoke. "All right, audacious child, I am indeed curious to test it. You seem to be the only human willing to risk your life for it. This might be a unique opportunity, and I don't want to miss it. The first human to leave the Forest of Roots. I'll be the first magical beast to witness it." It seemed to place great significance on this. Helmut explained how he planned to cross the barrier. Igrel, excited by his words, boasted about its plan. "I'll wrap you in magical energy. The magical barrier will shatter the moment you enter the barrier, but at least until you reach it, you'll be safe. Even if you're a human with as frail a bloodline as a fish." Surprised by the unexpected kindness, Helmut's eyes widened. "This would make it much safer to reach the barrier via the waterfall," Igrel added meaningfully. "I'm truly curious to see if you can cross that barrier." There was a sense of expectation, but it was a nonchalant affair for Igrel. It had nothing to lose. Hearing such words made Helmut's stomach churn and saliva pooled in his mouth. Fear and tension rose simultaneously. He had thought of it as something he must do without much preparation, but as the moment to dive into the water neared, Helmut couldn't remain calm. Igrel said, as if granting a favor, "Humans leave something called a will, right? If you have any last words, say them. I'll pass them on to Alaga if I meet her. Rulers of domains rarely encounter each other." Whether this message would be delivered was uncertain, but Helmut spoke. "Tell her I safely made it out of the Forest of Roots." Whether he would succeed or fail was unknown. There was no way to weigh the possibilities. Success or failure, only one of the two. Helmut tried not to think about the possibility of failure. Regardless of the outcome, he wouldn't regret it. So Alaga shouldn't either. If they never saw each other again, it was better for Alaga to believe Helmut had successfully made it out alive. "Regardless of the outcome, you mean?" "Yes." "All right." Igrel's slow response came after a fresh appraisal of Helmut. Helmut's words had piqued its curiosity, a human boy in tattered leather clothes. His hair and eyes, dark as if harboring shadows, absorbed light, contrasting sharply with his pale face. Even to a magical beast's eyes, he had well-proportioned features. Though lean and muscular, his delicate face seemed frail at a glance. But those eyes, the sharpness and determination in them completely altered Helmut's fragile impression. Such qualities were absent in magical beasts that lived and died according to their instincts in the Forest of Roots. He was not a weak human to be dismissed as mere prey. Helmut's words hinted at some bond with Alaga, a rare kind in the Forest of Roots where only the relationship between predator and prey existed. In the solitary existence of the Forest of Roots, here was a human concerned about the heart of a magical beast. "I never thought I'd envy a ground-dwelling creature incapable of flight," Igrel muttered out of the blue. "Should I pick up a human and raise one myself?" Ignoring Igrel's comment, Helmut stared at the waterfall, the rushing water splitting the sky horizontally before plunging below. The opaque barrier that had protected the outer world from the Forest of Roots for countless eons. Chapter 21, Part 2, Helmut's concentration and senses expanded. He felt the power contained within the barrier. An overwhelming force that purified all magical energy. The intense heat seemed capable of burning his skin. Entering it, Helmut felt he would quickly turn to ashes. "Let's go." Yet Helmut spoke, determination clear in his eyes. His eyes, dark as the abyss but holding a clear light, were unbreakable. Helmut jumped into the water. The rushing cold was like ice, the chilling current sharply awakening his senses. Swept away by the water, Helmut didn't need to swim. He felt Igrel following, its wings flapping behind him. Magical energy from Igrel enveloped him. The unfamiliar magical energy made his body twitch. He nearly summoned his fist to fend it off, but Igrel seemed intent on following through with the plan. At the waterfall's base, where the current accelerated, he would pierce through the barrier. Approaching the start of the waterfall, Igrel stopped at the cliff's edge. "Now the barrier, I wish you success." Helmut took a deep breath, plunging headfirst into the water. Swept down by the current, he felt a dizzying drop. Falling headfirst, his mind was clearer than ever. The blurry barrier appeared before his eyes. Before reaching it, Helmut closed his eyes. And then, the rushing water filled his open mouth, silencing his scream. An unbearable pain assaulted him. It felt as if a heated iron rod was piercing through his head and body. It was torture that forced all truths to be confessed. The purifying force burned deep within, scorching both the outside and inside of his skin. In that brief moment, Helmut died and was reborn thousands of times. The barrier repelled anything impure. The purifying force tolerated not even a trace of magical energy within Helmut's body. Helmut's vis scrambled to protect his vitals and organs. It dried up rapidly like a flimsy wooden shield trying to block lightning. His will to resist was instantly crushed. Maintaining consciousness became impossible. Swept by the current, Helmut lost consciousness, unaware if he had successfully crossed the barrier. At some point, a sound woke him, his own labored breathing. Unaware of how much time had passed, he lay in a damp, soggy place. Helmut thought dully, what happened? He was utterly weakened. Any magical beast, even a child, could have taken his life, and Helmut wouldn't have been able to resist. Surviving was a feat, but he was alive. Helmut belatedly realized this. I'm alive. With a hazy consciousness, Helmut managed to stand up. Grimacing in pain, he barely got to his feet. That he had any strength left was a miracle given his condition. Yet Helmut succeeded in standing on his own two legs. He couldn't see clearly, but he had to move. Instinctively, he sought a safer place. His whole body felt like it was breaking apart. Dry fragments scraped his lungs and the blazing sun drained his moisture. Breathing was a struggle amid the excruciating pain. Stumbling forward, he fell at a stone's trip, spreading a wave of agony. It hurts. A stifled groan turned solid in his throat. Blood-filled vision blurred everything. All was hazy and red, making it impossible to distinguish objects. Yet even in the worst state, his heart pulsed weakly, resiliently. Tenacious life force began to revitalize necrotic areas. Helmut sensed vis slowly gathering deep within him. His body was trying to recover slowly. His nearly dead body was healing. The implication. A deep sigh of relief covered his lips. His eyes, previously dim, flashed intensely like a beast's. Did I make it? Yes, he had. He had escaped. From the forest of roots known as the magical boundary, no one had ever done it before. Helmut, the only human to survive the forest of roots. The joy of success momentarily made him forget the pain. He didn't leap up only because he lacked the strength. Without time to savor the triumph, his eyes closed. Consciousness faded like a snuffed-out flame. His dying body quickly reached its limit. Energy was rapidly depleted, a comatose state. Incapable of anything, he lost consciousness again. This was Helmut's first step towards the world. Chapter 22, Part 1. Encounter with a new world. At the age of 14, Finn was the lowest rank in the moderately sized but well-reputed Pace Mercenary Corps. He was a boy whose skills were considered fortunate enough to be recognized as a fourth-rank mercenary with a bronze medal. Having been an orphan, Finn had been affiliated with the Pace Mercenary Corps since his childhood, taking on various errands. Things will too when I get a few years older. For that, he needed experience. The reason Finn had set out on this mission was because it was an errand. A large request had come in, hiring several mercenaries from the Pace Mercenary Corps. It was Finn's first mission, and he was extremely nervous, not to mention unaccustomed to camping, which made staying in the gloomy forest unnerving. Why do we have to rest in a place like this? This is near the Forest of Roots. Stop whining and go fetch some water. There's a stream over there, said Tanya, a third-rank silver medal mercenary with a smirk pointing at the water container. Tanya, also a member of the same mercenary corps as Finn, was a well-regarded and skilled mercenary. She was tall with a resilient figure, not stunningly beautiful but had a cheerful look with her short hair. Among the mercenaries, she was less demanding of Finn and had a better disposition. Finn hesitantly picked up the heavy water container. Ah, it's getting dark. Ah, what a habit, snap. Finn, whose head was smacked, pouted and picked up the water container. Hurry up and come back before it gets darker. His steps quickened after that remark. The forest, being close to the Forest of Roots known for its monsters, felt drearily damp. The air was humid, adding an unpleasant feeling. I should quickly fetch water and return. As soon as he reached the stream, Finn plunged the water container into the water, half expecting a water ghost to grab him. A water ghost. Come to think of it, I think I saw something earlier, and Finn inadvertently raised his head. Ah! A tremendous scream echoed from the valley. What's going on? Finn, pale as death, was seen running towards them as if his life depended on it. Surprisingly, his legs hadn't frozen in fear. The water container was nowhere to be seen. His hands were empty. There's a corpse, Mom, save me. Though a mercenary, Finn, who had only done errands for the mercenary corps, had never seen a corpse before. The mercenaries murmured among themselves. A corpse here? That kid's a coward, must have mistaken seen a piece of wood or something. I'll check it myself. Tanya took the lead, grabbing Finn by the shoulder. Where's the corpse? They're over there. Lead the way. You also need to retrieve the water container you left. Tanya spoke firmly, and Finn, with a crestfallen face, hesitantly led the way. The fear seemed to lessen with someone by his side. As they neared the valley, Finn hesitated and pointed. There, it was there. Where? This way. Then something caught Tanya's eye as she wandered. Half buried in sand and slightly moving with the water flow, it lay long and sideways like a log. It was unmistakably a human body. Tanya's expression hardened with alertness. A corpse here. They had taken a shortcut near the feared forest of roots because the client wanted the mercenaries to arrive as quickly as possible. A corpse in such a secluded place was unexpected. Tanya approached the corpse cautiously. As she got closer to the sandy corpse, her eyes widened. "Finn, come here quickly." "Yes, he's breathing, we need to get him out of here." Consciousness had completely faded away. It seemed all energy had been used up to maintain consciousness, almost like entering hibernation. The moment Helmut regained consciousness, he realized he was surrounded by bustling noise. His blood ran cold. Barely opening his eyes and sitting up, Helmut winced from a sharp pain. His muscles felt dislocated, creaking all over. "Where is this? What happened to me?" Helmut's gaze swiftly moved around. He was lying down, wrapped in a blanket with a fire crackling nearby, and people were chatting close to the fire. People, had he ever seen such a strange sight before? Helmut felt chillingly frozen. "Oh. You're awake," one of them noticed Helmut's awakening and approached. "Hey, are you conscious?" Shocked, Helmut looked up at the person, a woman with short hair. Helmut, for the first and last time, saw something completely different from the women in the human farm. She was much taller than Helmut and looked sturdy. The woman with short hair smiled at Helmut's frozen face. "Don't be scared, it's safe here." It wasn't fear but caution. Helmut observed her with dissatisfaction. Chapter 22, Part 2. "The guy who went to fetch water saw you in rags and screamed, thinking he had found a real corpse. It's a relief that you're in better shape than I thought. Why were you in such a place in such a state?" Helmut furrowed his brows at the barrage of words. He could understand them, but the unfamiliar gaze, the tone of this woman's voice didn't quite resonate with him, only confusion, yet he felt no hostility from them. She tilted her head. Still groggy. "What's your name?" "Helmut." Helmut answered hesitantly as he regained his senses. "I don't remember anything else." Helmut recalled Darien's advice. "You grew up in a unique environment. If you're unsure what to say, claim you don't remember. It's common to lose memory from a head injury." His hesitant speech unintentionally appeared sincere. Tanya frowned. "Really? That's troublesome. You seem to have lost your memory." "No major trauma visible, but did you hit your head?" After a moment of thought, she smiled broadly and extended her hand to Helmut. "My name's Tanya, a third-rank silver medal mercenary of the Pace Mercenary Corps. Your sword is beside you. That sword looks nice, doesn't it?" The hand she carelessly held felt oddly warm. Startled as if bitten, Helmut quickly checked the items brought from the forest of roots, including his pendant. Tied tightly to avoid falling off, fortunately it remained intact. It seemed scratched and dirty, likely unnoticed. "You've been applied with a potent medicine, so you should feel somewhat better. You seem to have a good recovery rate too." Helmut belatedly realized the rustling noise every time he moved. He hadn't felt it due to partially numbed senses. "My clothes." He had been changed. And inside, ointment was applied liberally and bandages were wrapped around. "Your clothes were torn to shreds, so that boy changed you. He also applied the medicine, so say thanks later." Tanya gestured towards a boy sleeping on a blanket nearby. "Ah, and just to be sure, you do know how to speak formally, right?" Helmut felt a sense of déjà vu at her scowling expression. "Yes. Good, that's settled then." Tanya's expression changed dramatically, smiling broadly. As Helmut checked his body, she went to the fire and returned with a bowl of soup-soaked bread. "Here, eat up." Darien said not to carelessly accept food outside. Helmut hesitated for a moment. But to the woman before him, he seemed like a vulnerable boy in need of care. She wouldn't feed him something strange. The growling in his stomach at the sight of food indicated his extreme hunger. Helmut decided to eat first and think later. The first meal outside the forest of roots was unremarkable but tasted good. "So do you know where you are?" "No, I don't. This is Decay Forest, don't remember." "Doesn't ring a bell?" "No." Tanya persistently dug into Helmut, who had finished eating. Having never experienced memory loss, Helmut naturally didn't know much to begin with, mimicking amnesia. Tanya seemed to believe Helmut had lost most of his memory except for a few basic facts. "This is tough, then what do you remember?" "My name, and that I can use a sword." If it's hard to fabricate lies, stick to limited truths. Darien's lesson, which Helmut faithfully executed again. "Know how to use a sword? That's good news. You need to recover first, though. Can you stand?" Helmut stood up. Although there was remaining pain, his body was more cooperative than before he lost consciousness the second time. Seemingly being in a deep state of unconsciousness had its benefits. Tanya nodded. "You seem fine physically, but what about your head? Might improve after seeing a doctor. We should visit one in the village." A man suddenly interjected. "Hey Tanya, are you going to hire a new errand boy?" He was abandoned in such a place, looking pitiful. "Lost his memory too. Since it's come to this, we should take care of him until he can walk on his own." The man reluctantly nodded. "Well, that's true," Tanya, patting Helmut's shoulder, cheerfully said. "Don't worry, just trust me. I'll take responsibility for you for now." Though bewildered, the warmth in her bright brown eyes and the smile showing her teeth conveyed inexplicable kindness. They had just met today, yet no ulterior motive seemed present in her gaze. Feels like I've been through this before. Helmut vaguely remembered a similar situation long ago, also in the Forest of Roots. Is there such a thing as a destiny to be picked up and cared for? If there was, it seemed to be Helmut's fate. Helmut knew what to say to this earnest benefactor. A faint smile curled around his lips. Thank you, but Tanya sternly said, yeah, but first you need to clean up. When Finn wakes up, go wash up together. Chapter 23 Part 1. In the dark of night, when only a few stood guard and the mercenaries went to bed, Helmut was finally alone. After regaining consciousness, he needed time to gather his thoughts. The process of crossing the barrier both before and after flashed through his mind instantly. I couldn't do this a second time. The pain experienced while passing through the barrier and immediately after was incomparably worse than nearly dying from poison. The mere thought of it was horrifying. Would he have attempted it if he had known how painful it would be? Helmut answered the question immediately. I would have tried, I would have thought it bearable before experiencing it. Humans are foolish creatures, not knowing until they experience. Helmut grimaced and placed a hand on his chest. It will take some time to fully recover. He must resume his vis training soon. Time was on his side. The body of a trained swordsman, the source of his life, had not collapsed. It was a difference of a single sheet of paper. The barrier had failed to destroy him beyond recovery. This meant that in time Helmut could regain his original strength. Am I in worse shape now than when I first started training? Feeling like a patient was unfamiliar to him. He still couldn't move vis. Although about 30% of it had returned, it was better not to use it recklessly. Forcing it could cause internal injuries as his body was not fully compliant. And there's still a seed of darkness within me. Helmut felt its presence inside his heart, emitting a faint heat like a smoldering ember. It was quiet and smaller than before. As he surrounded the seed of darkness with vis to exhaust it, it struggled to survive in the barrier, rapidly losing strength in the purifying barrier. However, it didn't completely disappear. Like a very thin breath, it managed to survive in his heart. He had hoped that crossing the barrier might extinguish it, but that was too much to expect. Perhaps it was a power rooted in Helmut from birth, possibly signifying the flame of life. Could the presence of the dark seed be the reason he hadn't died? This remarkable recovery, a product of the dark seed, but one fact was clear. I must hide its existence. And the fact that he had emerged from the forest of Par. Starting a new life from scratch, Helmut clenched the pendant tightly. Someday he would go to the owner of the voice that had once called his name. There was no rush, he had only just taken his first step. Is he moving? At dawn, the boy Finn, who had found him, exclaimed upon waking up and seeing Helmut. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. Helmut thanked him calmly. After some conversation, Finn seemed to accept that Helmut had lost his memory as soon as Tanya told him. When he asked to be taken to the water as Tanya had instructed, Finn nodded happily. Yeah, you look a mess right now. Doesn't it itch? Your face is so dirty, should have cleaned you up, but you were like a corpse, it was creepy to touch. Tanya had done the bare minimum. Finn looked at Helmut's stained face with disdain as if looking at something dirty. Still, it's good you woke up. We have to leave today and I was worried about what we'd do if you never woke up and actually became a corpse. Finn asked with a smirk, your name is Helmut. Yes, how old are you? 14, really. We're the same age, I thought you were older. Just as Finn looked at Helmut curiously, Helmut also found Finn somewhat curious. Talking with a boy his own age was a new experience for Helmut. When they reached the water, Finn pointed to a spot. That's where you were lying. But Helmut's gaze didn't follow. This valley. Helmut's eyes clouded over as he looked upstream. Following this valley could lead to the Forest of Roots. Is Alaga doing well? He hoped Agrel had relayed his message. Even though he had left of his own will, he couldn't forget it. The memories built from birth. Chapter 23 Part 2. Hey, hurry up and wash. I'm cold, Finn, having finished washing first, complained. Helmut followed him to the water and washed the dirt and sand from his face and hair. Helmut returned with Finn, who was now silent with a shocked expression. Everyone stared. They were all waking up and preparing to leave. Who is that? Is that the corpse-like guy from yesterday? Can washing up change a person so much? You couldn't look like that even if you washed for 100 days, man. Why are you starting a fight again? He looked so refined. A noble. Helmut, with his face clean and flawless, looked so noble that his old travel clothes seemed shabby. His delicate features and dark, mysterious eyes stood out. His expressionless face gave off a mystical aura. Having lost a lot of muscle over the past few days, his body had become slender. Helmut, looking out of place in the forest, seemed more like the heir to a noble family than a swordsman. Helmut quietly returned to his spot and inspected his sword. Are you by any chance a noble? Finn, who had been joking around until then, asked somewhat politely. Helmut stopped polishing his sword. Darien had mentioned that he might be of noble birth. Nobility, the ruling class of humans, but mercenaries were mostly commoners. Without proof of his status, that fact was irrelevant. Helmut evaded the question. I don't know. I told you I don't remember. What does it matter what his status is? Right now, he's just a guest of our mercenary group. Tanya, who had approached unnoticed, placed a hand on Helmut's shoulder. He greeted her, his senses gradually returning. Did you sleep well, Tanya? Yes, did you sleep well? You're looking much better. It's nice to see you looking so handsome. Look at how polite she becomes when someone's good looking. Snap. Finn, complaining for no reason, clutched his head and yelled. Ah, shut up and go help with the preparations to leave. Tanya, having suddenly turned friendly again, handed Helmut some clothes. You need to recover quickly. You look so destitute, I brought some spare clothes. The 3 sets of clothes were all different sizes, all too large for Helmut, but for him it was a luxury. He had lived on less than this in extreme poverty. Are you feeling better than yesterday? Yes, I'm improving. We should reach the village in 3 days. Hang in there until then, we'll see a doctor. All right. If you need to pack anything, do it now. We're on our way to a client and we'll be leaving soon. Yes, Tanya. Tanya looked at Helmut, responding dutifully with fondness. After she ran her hand through Helmut's hair, she waved and left. About 30 minutes later, the group departed. Are you sure you're okay? How about riding in the carriage? It's quite fast and it might be hard to keep up. I think walking will help loosen up my body. Normally, they would ride horses, but they had chosen to walk through the forest path. Everyone here was a mercenary with strong legs. The carriage was just a small cart with cargo. It was more comfortable to walk than to sit crammed among the luggage. He needed to recover, but to resume training, he had to start moving. Helmut walked beside the brown pack horse. It was the first time he had seen an animal that wasn't a beast. To think such gentle creatures existed, it was a series of novelties. Monsters became docile in front of Alaga, but their nature was different. When he touched its nose, the horse seemed to enjoy it, puffing out its breath. It seemed not to have the instinct to sense the dark seed in Helmut. Do you like horses? Ah, it seems so. If he likes pack horses, he's probably not a noble. Finn looked at Helmut with mixed feelings. Unintentionally, he had been keeping an eye on Helmut's every move. He didn't act prideful or superior, but his appearance and gaze were extraordinary. He didn't feel like a common boy raised in a village. Something trained, restrained. That kind of feeling. He wondered why Helmut had been lying there, but he said he didn't remember, and Tanya didn't seem curious. Ah, what's the use of thinking about it? Deciding to give up, Finn looked at Helmut and saw him staggering. Hey Helmut, what's wrong? His complexion turned pale, sweat beaded on his forehead. What's going on? Are you having a seizure? Do you have a chronic illness? Chapter 24, Part 1. No. I'm just out of breath. Finn's expression became enigmatic. Indeed, the slope had been getting steeper. It would probably flatten out again soon, but forest paths are naturally quite uneven. We've only been walking for less than 30 minutes and already, Finn was flabbergasted. Even though he was merely running errands in the mercenary corps, he was a rank 4 mercenary himself. Naturally, he was a sturdy boy with good stamina. Being surrounded by individuals far stronger than himself, he had little concept of those who were not. To think such a weakling exists in this world. Isn't this just like a noble young master? It was more of pity than contempt. Finn had completely forgotten the fact that Helmut carried a sword and had been in such bad shape that he had lost consciousness until recently. With a look of pity that was almost humiliating, Finn offered, "Why don't you ride in the carriage? You'll fall behind otherwise." Even as it pulled the luggage cart, the draft horse moved briskly ahead. Helmut, now seemingly the weakest of the weak, felt oddly irritated but replied calmly, "I will not fall behind." Hey, do whatever you want. Helmut was indeed troubled by the current situation. He had seen weak beings in the surrounding where monsters were lurking, but he had never been so easily tired because he was born with the seed of darkness. The term weakling had been foreign to him since childhood. Why is this so hard? When he regained consciousness for the first time, even taking a few steps was difficult. Hadn't there been pain just last night? Perhaps it was too ambitious to walk at the same pace as the mercenaries in just one day. However, Helmut's body had undergone rigorous training without fail for 4 years. Fortunately, his condition improved noticeably with each day of their 3-day journey. I'll be able to resume training soon. The minor cuts inside the bandaged body had almost healed, leaving only scars behind. Though his strength had not fully returned, he was now capable of walking and lightly running without much trouble. Finn, who had been by his side throughout these 3 days, had grown more favorable towards Helmut, weak but persevering. Mercenaries value those with a strong will. Doesn't seem to be anything particularly wrong, he's naturally strong. Such a body heals well. This was when Tanya had accompanied him to visit the village doctor. After carelessly poking and prodding at Helmut's upper body, the doctor declared, "Did you examine him properly? Hey, woman. What do you take me for? I'll prepare some medicine, so just take care of it yourself." "No, this boy was unconscious until recently, you quack." Who's a quack? He woke up because he was supposed to. Was he supposed to die instead? He's perfectly fine now, rarely seen such a good recovery. These types rarely die, so take this and be off. It seemed the doctor wasn't a quack after all. This fellow, you say he's suffering from memory loss and you speak so lightly of it. Memory will return eventually. What can I do about that? The doctor, annoyed, carelessly mixed some herbs to make a pill. Tanya received the pouch of pills with a clearly displeased expression. After she paid, the doctor bluntly instructed Helmut, take the medicine 3 times a day. Are you really okay? Finn said you were trembling from the difficulty of walking. Helmut frowned. He was aware that Finn saw him as weak. He had endured it so far thanks to Finn's kindness, but it was starting to irk him. He felt a need to set things straight. It's not that bad, I was just weak because I had been lying down too much. I'm okay now. Really? Well, I've seen your grip and your body, it's well trained. You know how to use a sword, right? You must have trained under a master. Properly, Tanya had hit the nail on the head. Muscles may shrink, but the calluses formed from gripping a sword for a long time don't disappear easily. They were the evidence of Helmut's extensive swordplay. Helmut nodded. Yes. It feels familiar in my hand, I must have swung it a lot. It was Darien's sword and Helmut hadn't wielded it for long enough for it to feel familiar, but that detail wasn't important. Then how about dueling with me? Dueling? Don't feel pressured, just think of it as loosening up. I've been swinging my sword at the air recently, bored out of my mind. The mercenary band was staying at an inn with a spacious courtyard. They would meet up with their client tonight or tomorrow morning. Until then, the Pace mercenaries planned to rest and recover from their travels. Okay. Chapter 24, Part 2, Helmut's eyes sparkled with competitive spirit. Competing for strength was as familiar to him as hunting. Dueling with a person from the outside world, an opportunity I cannot miss. A rank 3 silver medal mercenary seemed to be quite recognized in the human world. Fighting her might give Helmut an idea of where his own skills stood. Several members of the Pace mercenaries, itching for some action, had gathered in the inn's courtyard to train. When Tanya and Helmut appeared, all eyes were on them. Tanya, you're going to duel with him? Yeah, so everyone step back and watch. This'll be a good show. They moved to the side, sitting down and turning into complete spectators, shouting enthusiastically. Isn't that guy going to break if you just poke him? Go easy, you'll hurt his pretty face. Isn't his face prettier than yours, Tanya? Shut your mouths before I rip them off, Tanya yelled, somewhat threateningly, and the crowd quieted down. Use this, I'll take this one. What was handed to him was a blunt wooden sword. Helmut felt somewhat relieved. She was different from Alaga, who wouldn't be hurt no matter how Helmut attacked. If Tanya was a skilled fighter, it would be hard for Helmut to go easy on her. He didn't want to hurt someone who had taken care of him. The rule is simple. The match goes until one of us is on the ground. Come at me with all you've got. I'm strong, Tanya confidently spoke as she held the wooden sword, and Helmut carefully balanced his stance. He had always been taught to take the sword seriously. There was no room for carelessness or half-heartedness. Wow, that stance is no joke. Where did he learn that properly? This is going to be interesting, let's see what you've got. The mercenaries' murmurs faded into the background as Helmut's focus sharpened. He was aware that his physical condition wasn't the best. He couldn't use vis, and if his strength didn't suffice, he had to fight by deflecting and dodging, a tactic familiar from dueling with Darien. Are you going to dawdle all day? Come at me, Tanya's sharp challenge finally spurred Helmut into action. Even a mere twig, when held by a swordsman, becomes a weapon. A woman's balance is different from a man's. Helmut's focused gaze caught every movement of Tanya's bones and muscles. Left side. Tanya easily parried the thrust aimed at her, a spot she could defend but not strongly counterattack. Still, it made her grip ache. She definitely has more strength than me. Then it was Tanya's turn to attack. She thrust towards Helmut's head without hesitation, which he watched closely and dodged, moving inside to stab at her diaphragm. Tanya's arm muscles tensed, and the direction of her wooden sword, previously slashing through the air, changed. Helmut tried to easily dodge the sword coming in from the side. Thud, however, he gripped his side in a numbing pain. Why couldn't I dodge that? If he had moved in just a bit faster, it would have been Tanya who was struck. But his legs didn't keep up. His body, unable to follow the movements he envisioned, moved as slowly as a worm shackled. What to do? But Tanya didn't give him time to think. She rushed in, stabbing with her sword repeatedly. The speed matched her strength. Thud, thud, he managed to parry the first 2 strikes by swinging his wooden sword to the side, but the impact numbed his wrists. The third strike hit him squarely in the abdomen. Thud, Tanya smirked as she tripped Helmut's staggering legs. Thump, she lightly pressed the tip of her wooden sword against the prone Helmut's throat. Helmut, with tense jaw, admitted defeat. I lost. Tanya reached out to help him up, her face once again wearing a cheerful and friendly smile as if she had never provoked him. She teased Helmut, you seem frustrated by the look in your eyes. Because I was beaten one-sidedly. Helmut retorted tersely, sighing. More than being beaten, he was frustrated with his body, which didn't move as he wished. The opponent felt far too flawed compared to Darien, and his swordsmanship wasn't perfectly efficient. He knew how to counter, but his body couldn't follow through. Or is Tanya stronger than I thought? She was neither a first nor a second rank, but a third-rank mercenary who had played with him. Even if he returned to his original body, he doubted his skills would be effective. I must be quite ordinary. Indeed, as Darien had said, the human world was not to be underestimated. Helmut was reminded of this anew. Then someone approached and spoke. Tanya is well recognized even in our mercenary corps. It's natural you lost, don't be too hard on yourself. The man had a stern face and a significantly larger build, with bright brown eyes similar to Tanya's. Although Helmut had seen him only a few times, it felt more familiar because of his eyes. Chapter 25, Part 1. Other mercenaries also began to stand up one by one, approaching to share their impressions of the duel they had watched. This guy, he has a competitive spirit and his movements are decent. With a bit of refinement, he could be quite useful. Isn't his judgment quite good, the way he dove in earlier? If only his leg strength had been a bit better, it would have been effective. Right, he didn't flinch like Finn, responding properly instead. Finn, who had come late and was just watching, suddenly got angry. Hey, why are you comparing me again? You cowardly kid, you're too scared to even go fetch water by yourself, always calling him to go with you. We can go together. He can help out that much at least. Anyway, since he's the same rank 4 as you, don't act all high and mighty and get along. You don't have any other peers, do you? What do you mean I'm acting high and mighty? I've been so accommodating and caring because he's a patient. Yeah, just do that. It's good for you to have a friend, isn't it? Friend, what friend? Finn grumbled while sneaking glances at Helmut. However, he seemed somewhat excited. Finn already considered himself to have become quite close with Helmut. Helmut cocked his head, thinking the conversation took a strange turn, when a man with bright brown eyes patted his shoulder and said, "Anyway, you passed. Was this some kind of test?" He hadn't heard anything about that. Tanya grinned, showing her teeth, and raised her thumb. "Well done. Yeah, you've passed the entrance examination. You are now a member of the Pace Mercenary Corps. We didn't tell you about the test because, if you had failed, we were just going to leave you in this village. We have missions to carry out, and it's difficult to do so with someone who's not a member of the group. And we can't just let anyone join the mercenaries. I could have been left behind." He wasn't particularly upset about it. He had looked around the village to understand how humans lived and survived. He thought this would be a farewell, but the sudden acceptance was somewhat awkward. Everyone was watching you from a distance. But well, you didn't seem like a troublemaker, and it's common for young ones to often crawl to Tanya, but you didn't. So everyone agreed when Tanya suggested an entrance test. He had wondered if human men naturally distanced themselves from strangers because they only whispered among themselves and didn't talk to him. It turns out they were just observing from a distance. My name is Fiend. I'm one of only 2 rank 2 gold medal mercenaries in the Pace Mercenary Corps, and I'm the overall in charge of this mission. Rank 2 gold medal mercenary and the mission's leader. Helmut looked at him skeptically. He thought Fiend was a subordinate since Tanya was so casual with him. Fiend smiled and added, "Tanya is my younger sister." If both siblings were skilled mercenaries, it meant their family had a talent for swordsmanship. Now everyone introduce yourselves. My name is Byrne, rank 3 silver medal mercenary. I'm Uter, I'm also rank 3. Marrows, rank 3 silver medal. Do we need to mention rank 3 silver medal? Except for Finn, we're all rank 3. I'm Sean. Always picking on me. Fine, I'm rank 4 bronze medal. Finn. With Finn's introduction, everyone finished introducing themselves. Finn began to explain as he pushed Helmut's back to lead him somewhere. To officially register as a rank 4 mercenary, you have to visit the Mercenary Guild. Since our mercenary corps recognizes you, it should be valid, so we'll write you a mercenary certificate. The certificate he handed out was densely written with Helmut's physical characteristics. The Pace Mercenary Corps vouched for his skills. Mercenaries often hide their pasts, so there's no need to write about your identity, unless you're a major criminal with a bounty on your head. Even if you were of noble birth, there's no special treatment. It's rude among mercenaries to pry into each other's past. He had easily accepted when Helmut claimed to have amnesia, likely influenced by such an atmosphere. No one had pressured Helmut to recall his memories quickly, though they were concerned about his physical recovery. A mercenary job is a profession that lives on power and experience. The former is more important, but the latter cannot be ignored either. But what's clear is that skilled mercenaries are wanted everywhere. Helmut remained silent. He belatedly realized that becoming a new member of the Pace Mercenary Corps had become a foregone conclusion. Even the amiable mercenaries didn't seem to consider asking for his opinion. Staying with them for a while wouldn't be bad, but he had planned his next destination. Chapter 25, Part 2. However, as amnesiac Helmut, it was a difficult story to bring up. Am I treated like a child because I'm 14? But Helmut was not a very young child but a complete stranger. It seemed the outside world was more generous than he thought. Or maybe the people of the Pace Mercenary Corps were unusually kind. Darienne's words that the human world was no less dangerous than the Forest of Roots were wrong, at least for now. But the Forest of Roots also had monsters like Alaga, so it was too early to judge. Helmut felt lucky. There's something I want to make clear. What is it? If I join the Mercenary Corps, how long do I have to stay? I might have to leave somewhere if I find my memories. Leaving is your freedom. Of course, deserting in the middle of a mission is not allowed. It's a matter of the Pace Mercenary Corps' reputation. But after the mission, you can leave whenever you want. Just let us know, okay? All right. He thought the profession of a mercenary might be useful to him. Acting as Helmut from the Pace Mercenary Corps' rank 4 mercenary seemed more convenient than just Helmut. And Helmut was currently penniless. He needed money. Staying in the Mercenary Corps to learn more about the human world might be a good idea. There's still time. Helmut signed his name on the certificate. He knew how to write, but when he held the quill pen and tried to write, his hand was full of strength. Everything was unfamiliar, the sensation, the certificate, but he was less confused than at first. Helmut was gradually adapting to this new world. That night, the Mercenary Corps welcomed a client. This mission was a transport request from the Butin Trading Company. The amount was quite generous. The client wanted to hire more members of the Pace Mercenary Corps, but it was impossible. The request came in urgently. There were already many people assigned elsewhere, so they couldn't accommodate more. That's why it wasn't a mission taken on alone. From the start, it was to be carried out together with the Tariq Mercenary Corps who came with the client. Welcome, please come in. Fiend, it's been a while, I can trust you. It's an honor, Sir Miles. Fiend shook hands with the other party. The stern-looking middle-aged man was Miles, a manager under the trading company's owner. He greeted the mercenaries familiarly. Good to see you again, Tanya. It's been a while, Sir Miles. They had received several requests from him before. The Pace Mercenary Corps had a good reputation in the industry, leading to frequent re-requests. Miles looked over the mercenaries and nodded, then suddenly cocked his head. The number doesn't match, there's one more. We recently added this guy to the Mercenary Corps. He's a rank 4 bronze medal mercenary named Helmut. Fiend pushed Helmut forward. Fortunately, Helmut looked mature for his age, so there wasn't a feeling of bringing too young a person. Miles, known for being meticulous in his work, expressed his dissatisfaction. Didn't you say this was an important mission? This isn't a job where rank 4 mercenaries should be lining up. How can such a guy be of any help? You already accepted one errand boy at your request, and now this. Finn's face turned red. It turned out he was also included in the urgent request as an errand boy. Hearing that he was considered useless and included made him feel both humiliated and embarrassed. Miles's mood rapidly soured. 2 errand boys, this is too much. Working with a mercenary corps often leads to situations like this. Unexpected lower-ranking personnel are added, while the fee remains the same. He had favored the Pace Mercenary Corps because such incidents were rare, but now he felt disappointed and displeased. In such cases, a strong stance is necessary to prevent the other party from exploiting them. Fiend had no intention of backing down. Just as a merchant doesn't conduct business at a loss, a mercenary doesn't work without compensation. Joining the Pace Mercenary Corps meant ensuring his share was properly secured. Fiend wasn't just the leader because he was a rank 2 gold medal mercenary. Managing situations like this was part of Fiend's role. He signaled Tanya to hold back with a glance and firmly stated, "Sir, Miles, have you ever been dissatisfied with our mercenary corps' work? It's not like we brought him along just to fill numbers. This guy will definitely be useful." As the other party didn't back down, Miles, like a true merchant, calculated his options. "Well, I insisted on the Pace Mercenary Corps because they are reliable in their work. Other mercenary groups do the same. It's better not to create friction unnecessarily, especially with an important mission ahead. If there are 2 rank 4 mercenaries, they'll probably be more cautious." Miles's tone softened a bit. "Useful or not, what's your strength? What can you do?" Fiend pressured him with a look that said if there were no strengths, he'd make some up. Helmut's mouth calmly opened. Chapter 26, Part 1, Hunting. It was a firm voice. "Are you confident in hunting? In the human world, there is something called money, and this money is given in exchange for goods or labor." Helmut was penniless and he needed money to travel. After looking around the village, Helmut thought about what he could do to earn money. The answer was hunting. It wasn't going to be difficult to catch rabbits or deer that weren't monsters but merely running around. "That's right, this guy is exceptionally good at hunting." Fiend patted Helmut's shoulder and raised his voice. There was a determination to push forward. Miles' expression softened. Well, that's a good advantage. The journey is long, so occasionally hunting for meat will be necessary. All right, I'll accept you on behalf of the Pace Mercenary Corps, but since you're an extra member, I'll only pay 80% of the usual wage. Any objections? No. When Helmut agreed so readily, Miles regretted not offering only 70%. However, he liked that Helmut understood things quickly. Fiend quickly stepped forward. Here, Miles took the document Fiend handed over. Rank 2 gold medal Fiend. Rank 3 silver medal Tanya Byrne Uter Maros Sean. Rank 4 bronze medal Helmut Finn. Miles checked the list of mercenaries participating in this mission for the Face Mercenary Corps, signed the document and handed it back. Then it's decided. We leave at 7 in the morning tomorrow, so be prepared. As he turned and disappeared, Fiend patted Helmut's shoulder again. That went well, but are you sure you're okay? You seem almost fully recovered from the dueling. Fiend saw the potential of a rank 3 mercenary in Helmut's movements. No, even the potential to reach rank 2. For a boy of only 14, the possibilities were endless. A good talent has been recruited. He may not stay long, but once a connection is made, when Helmut wishes to seriously pursue a mercenary life later, he will look for the Face Mercenary Corps. Bringing Helmut into the group was also an investment for the mercenary group. Investments need to be pleasing. It was true that the boy had caught the eyes of the people in the mercenary group. Helmut nodded. Yes, there's no problem. Tanya is said to be a skilled fighter among rank 2 mercenaries, but if he were to lose easily to her, his physical condition must still not be right. Just a few days ago, he was close to death. The fact that he was walking around now was a miracle of recovery for a human. It would have been nice to have a bit more leisure, but it was advantageous to act together with the Face Mercenary Corps. It was time to start training in Vis. Before this mission ends, the goal was to recover his original strength, Fiend advised. Our mission is an escort and Finn will tell you what to do. Unless there's a sudden attack, there's no need for you guys to fight. Rank 4 mercenaries were essentially considered non-combat personnel. Especially young Helmut and Finn were not intended for battle. From tomorrow, we will act together with the Tariq Mercenary Corps. It's a fairly large-scale mission involving 2 mercenary corps. Other mercenaries joined in the conversation. Even if the Tariq Mercenary Corps guys start something, just ignore and let it slide. They're not too happy with us. Our corps is more successful and has a better reputation, so they're envious. Moreover, there was a big mission before, and although it was initially given to them, the client changed their mind and gave it to us instead. We were unaware. They must have been quite upset. But they won't cause trouble in front of the client. Minor annoyances maybe, but Finn tends to get excited easily, so keep an eye on him. We don't want any internal conflicts. I don't get excited that easily, really. Even the fiercest beast is cautious during recovery. Helmut was already planning to keep a low profile, regardless of their warnings. Lucky us. I mean, what kind of talk was that? That old man, a rank 4 mercenary, is still a mercenary, but he's being so stingy cutting the pay. While Finn ranted about Miles, Helmut thought about his future tasks. Finn, who had been bothering him by talking continuously even in the dormitory, finally went to bed late at night, claiming he was sleepy. Helmut was then able to go out to the clearing where they had sparred earlier. The other mercenaries would be resting in preparation for tomorrow's mission. Now that the nuisance is gone, Helmut knew Finn cared about him, but frankly it was annoying. He mulled over their conversation. Do you know about Vis training method? Of course. I learned it too, but it didn't seem very effective. They say you need to train consistently from a very young age for it to be effective, so many give up. Even among rank 3 mercenaries, only the skilled ones can handle it a bit. He had seen Finn swinging his sword, but he had not seen him training with Vis many times. In fact, his posture was so awkward it could hardly be called proper Vis training. It was natural for mercenaries who did not have a proper master. There were not many people who perfectly learned the training method and trained Vis daily as Helmut had. Though Vis training had become widespread, mastering it properly was challenging. Darien had rigorously trained him from the basics. Nobles from sword families or academy graduates, knights, were the ones who went to such lengths. Even less so among mercenaries. Not only through Vis training could one master Vis, a well-trained body and regulated breathing attract Vis. As the skill in swordsmanship increases, so does the spirit's ability to draw in Vis. However, focusing solely on swordsmanship without proper Vis training was not a good approach. No matter how skilled in swordsmanship, without Vis, one cannot surpass the physical limits. Vis allows one to break free from those limits. Conversely, training only in Vis was meaningless. Without a disciplined body and mind, controlling Vis was impossible. Trying to gather Vis without control could twist the energy and harm or even kill the body. That's why Darien always emphasized balance. Tanya and Fiend seemed to pay more attention to Vis training than the other mercenaries. During a previous duel, Tanya did not use Vis extensively but utilized it to strengthen her muscles. Because of that, Helmut could sense a faint aura of Vis from her. He was unsure how well she could handle Vis, but he felt confident in facing her once he regained his strength. Helmut was filled with a desire for revenge. Losing in his first duel after coming out had left him extremely frustrated. I'll start today. Chapter 26 Part 2. Having focused on recovery until now, Helmut planned to start moving Vis gradually. He grasped a wooden sword and took his stance. The formal vis training taught by Darien unfolded. I succeeded. After a round of training, Helmut frowned, clenching and unclenching his hand. Sweat drenched him as if it were raining. Attempting his usual routine, he nearly twisted the vis due to the slight burden, causing pain. Therefore, Helmut had to slow down, moving more slowly but accurately. Yet after completing the training, his body felt lighter and more comfortable. I'm faster than before. Living in the forest of roots, it was impossible to be completely free from magic. The sacred barrier not only burned the seed of darkness, but also the magic deeply embedded in Helmut's body. The power of purification spread like fire on oil, trying to burn all magic without a trace. They say the pain of burns is among the greatest a human can experience. Helmut felt as though he was burning alive in hell. His body fought desperately to survive in that hell. His flesh became soft and ruptured, barely healing in time. But a body that has reached its limit is not the same as before. It became more robust with faster recovery, clean as a newborn's. Previously, it was like pouring water on ordinary soil, but now it was like drought-stricken land greedily absorbing water, rapidly absorbing vis. Helmut carefully assessed his condition. 10 days, that should be enough. It might even take less time. As vis accumulates, his recovery will improve. Helmut hesitated before attempting another round of vis training. Hadn't Darien always said, hurrying might actually set you back? Considering the pace, more vis training today seemed unwise. No need to rush, I'm recovering. Helmut planned out his actions from the moment he left the forest of roots. Time was on his side. While on a mission, personal time might be limited, but he could train vis at night. Despite the itch to do more, he had to be patient. Helmut was a boy with unparalleled patience. The next day, Fiend gathered the mercenaries before departure. Let's go, it's an important mission, so stay alert. We've been paid generously. We need to earn our keep. Tanya grinned confidently. As an experienced mercenary, she was relaxed, as were the other rank 3 mercenaries. Only Finn, taking on his first mission, was nervous. I feel like I'm going to throw up everything I ate this morning. Having emptied 3 large plates of soup and bread since morning, it was no wonder his stomach was upset. Hey weakling, are you okay? Starting today, it's going to be really tough. You have to watch the horses, fetch water, and walk all day. Can you handle it? Finn asked mockingly. Helmut had shown promise in the duel with Tanya. But the image of him sweating profusely while struggling to keep up was still fresh. Finn still considered Helmut a weakling who had learned a bit of swordplay. Again, my name is not weakling, it's Helmut. I can handle it. Helmut corrected him firmly, his expression hardening. Helmut was a bit angry. He knew that in the human world, strength and weakness didn't determine everything, but Finn's attitude had been bothering him. Weak but unaware of their weakness, climbing and scraping up. Helmut is a human from the forest of roots, a world where it's entirely natural for the weak to submit to the strong. Of course, he did not obey in live, but he did not underestimate Darien or Alaga. It seems he's putting me completely below him. The attitude of a boy of the same age, clearly inferior, was naturally irritating. However, Helmut had reasons for not being able to discipline Finn. Finn was one of the people who had saved him, along with Tanya, and there was an inexplicable unease. To Helmut's eyes, Tanya didn't seem all that strong. Yet he had been completely defeated by her. I won't lose to this guy. No matter how much his body hadn't fully recovered, it would be quite pathetic if he lost. Let's see once I'm fully recovered. Thinking of the future, Helmut's gaze turned cold. Why does this guy look so fierce all of a sudden? His eyes are already pitch black. Did calling him weakling make him angry? A speck of instinct made Finn wary. The boy might be of high birth despite his amnesia. Angering him wouldn't be wise. He smiled warmly, placing his hand on Helmut's shoulder. Right, Helmut, hey, I'm just worried about you. Why so serious? Finn quickly changed his tone. Anyway, let's do our best. It's our first mission. Right, be generous to the weak. Helmut recalled Darien's teaching and decided to let it go for now. There would be a chance to repay. Helmut was determined, his eyes cold as they set off on their mission.